Warrior Lore. Chapter 873 Ruling out the most suspicious ones. What do you mean by that? Another one of the aunties asked. I don't trust the rest of you, so I'm only going to consult with the two of them. Gustav explained his intentions. What sort of joke are you making? Uncle Bila voiced out. It is no joke. You are all suspects, Gustav said while walking forward calmly. Watch your tone, your lad. Don't make senseless accusations, Uncle Ronnie voiced out as well. Okay. You are all suspects. Gustav repeated the same statement, causing most of them to show looks of annoyance and discontent. Uncles, aunts, let's all relax. There's no reason to get riled up. Just let him do his job, Stark stated while trying to make the tense atmosphere calm a little. Officer Crimson, we've prepared a good accommodation within the household for you, Madame Lillian voiced out with a smile. Julie, please show Officer Crimson to his room, she added while gesturing at her daughter who had just arrived with Stark a while ago. Julie nodded and asked Gustav to follow her. They'll settle in for now and begin investigations a little later. Don't mind my presence in this house. I could be anywhere at any time, Gustav said as he walked away with Julie. Will he have access to everywhere? Uncle Bila asked. So long as he is in this household and working on the issue, then yes, Madame Lillian answered. And I don't want to hear any complaints from any one of you, she added before anyone could voice out their complaints. Uncle Bila and a few others had looks of dissatisfaction on their faces, but after hearing that, they kept quiet. I don't have any issues with that. Anyways, Mom, uncles, aunts, see y'all later, I gotta go, Stark stated before walking away. We still have things to discuss, Madame Lillian yelled out, but Stark had already zoomed out of the vault room. She shook her head and let out a frustrated sigh before gesturing for the others to follow her back to the living room. Gustav walked along a wide corridor that led towards the far east of the household. They were currently one floor up as Julie led him towards the room that was prepared for him. Julie was truly a beautiful brown-skinned lady with a voluptuous rear view and attractive bearing. She walked by Gustav's side with her hands joined together in front of her. I hope you enjoy your stay here, she said with a smile. I'm not here to enjoy my stay. I'm here to work, Gustav responded bluntly without a change in expression. I guess what they say about you is true, she said with a light chuckle. Gustav mumbled. I know you're here to work, but you could loosen up a bit. Life is more fun when you're being less grumpy, Julie said with a gentle tone. What do you know about having a fun life? You can't even leave your own house without supervision. Talk more of this island you all have isolated yourselves away in, Gustav voiced out with an uncaring tone, causing Julie's face to stifle up a bit. Ouch. Well, I guess you were kinda right. I am mentioning having a fun life when my life is the way it is, but you have to understand that there's nothing I can do to change this. The Vertigan family has always been like this, Julie said with a wry smile. Sure, thanks for the concern. I'll loosen up when I get the job done, Gustav stated as they arrived at the end of the corridor. Julie smiled at his response, not offended by what he had just said. Mycenite City was mostly cut off from the rest of the world, and the Vertigan family did not like to really get involved in worldly matters unless the MBO or the world government needed their help. The family was not only powerful in resources, but they also had 2 alpha-rank mixed bloods from their family as well as hundreds of mixed bloods within the Kilo to Delta rank. Warrior Lord, they were practically a powerful private army, and considering how strong a lineage bloodline is, it was no doubt that they could truly take on almost any situation. No one would dare to attack Mycenite City, both mixed blood terrorists or any form of adversity, since everyone knew just how much of a strong collective force they were. Despite being below the Kilo rank, Gustav was sent here because the current situation wasn't one that only required strength. Besides, the main family was trying to keep the situation under the wraps so they wouldn't want others to be involved. Julie came to know of Gustav through Stark, who was always invested in the outside world situations. He followed the rise of Gustav from the MBO test phases down to the Burning Sands issue. Amongst the 3 sisters, Julie was the closest to him, so he would open up about how he wanted to meet Gustav one day and maybe team up with him to fight bad guys or something. Hey, race your room. It automatically gives you access, so there's no need for any keycard, Julie said as they arrived in front of the last room at the end of the corridor. Just as Julie mentioned, the moment Gustav stood in front of the door, it slid open for him. My room is at the other end. It's the second door by the left. Don't hesitate to reach out if you need any help, she said with a gentle tone that somewhat reminded Gustav of Angie. I will, thank you, Gustav said before walking into his room. He was still surprised that she wasn't pissed after everything he said. He had mentioned all of them were suspects, and even threw her off when she said he should loosen up a bit. Yet she didn't seem angry or treat him with contempt after all that. Gustav looked around the room he had just gotten into. It was practically a house of its own. There was a small living room space with sofas and a holographic screen that was displaying some cartoons. The room corner also had a massive holographic screen and calming dim lights. A king-sized bed and so many decorations with artistic figures on the walls. This was way more luxurious than the penthouse the MBO rented for him during his stay in Burning Sand City. I will, thank you, Gustav said before walking into his room. He was still surprised that she wasn't pissed after everything he said. He had mentioned all of them were suspects, and even threw her off when she said he should loosen up a bit. Yet she didn't seem angry or treat him with contempt after all that. Gustav looked around the room he had just gotten into. It was practically a house of its own. There was a small living room space with sofas and a holographic screen that was displaying some cartoons. The room corner also had a massive holographic screen and calming dim lights. A king-sized bed and so many decorations with artistic figures on the walls. Good, there are no monitoring devices, he said internally as he deactivated God Eyes. Gustav didn't really care about the luxuriousness of this place. He just moved towards the bed and took a seat on it. In his head, he replayed everything that had happened upon his arrival here in Mycenite City. Gustav noted the actions, replies, and attitudes of every single family member as he replayed the scenes in his head. Chapter 874 Moving out. Bila is definitely suspicious, being so defensive and trying to get rid of me at the start. Ronnie seemed calm and collected and didn't make any weird expressions even after all my provocation. The grandparents barely spoke. Ruling them completely out is not an option, but they're less suspicious than the rest. Madame Salora is also less suspicious as her body language indicates eagerness when I mention the investigation. Stark's three sisters, Julie, Leonera, and Pearl were also less suspicious as well. Their characters were more like the type that couldn't handle conflicts except for Julie, who seemed more invested compared to the other two. Gustav continued to note everything he had noticed during the little time he spent with them. His main reason for trying to get on their nerves with his announcement of not trusting anyone was to see how they'd react. Of course, he was being serious when he said all of them were suspects, but this was something he would rather keep to himself instead of saying out. However, at that moment where he mentioned it, his eyes were on every single one of them. But there was something Gustav didn't mention. He was also suspicious of Stark. He had asked if Stark was willing to become the family head, but no one answered. He figured he'd have to get close to Stark to pick to uncover his true desires and know whether or not this incident was something he could plan. After minutes of outlining everything he had noticed, Gustav had a list of 7 main family members he suspected the most and had be conducting secret investigations on as well. Of course, there was still a huge probability that this was plotted by other branches of the family, so Gustav would still have to scout the entire Vertigan premises. Then he'd extend his search to the entire city as well. His mission was to find the emblem, and it was still on this island, so he'd have to act as soon as possible before any changes were made. It was a big island, but they called it Mycenite City. There was no other city here. It was just a collective people of a singular city on an island. This made things easier for Gustav. Gustav brought out a card that was yellow with patches of red. This was something he had gotten from Mara. Mara invented this card that read lingering energy from anything, a device, battery, weapon, anything that emitted a form of energy. After reading the energy, the card would react alarmingly when it was within a certain proximity of the source of whatever energy it read. Luckily, there was still lingering energy from the emblem due to where it was kept all this time, so the card was able to read a little. All Gustav had to do now was visit every nook and cranny of this city if he wanted to find the emblem. The only way the card wouldn't react was if the emblem had been buried underground or hidden in a water body, and these were 2 possible scenarios considering they were on an island. Gustav decided to study the map of the city once more before getting to work. It only took him a few moments of glancing through before he could tell the location of every place within the city. Changing out of his MBO outfit, Gustav wore a dark hoodie and pants before moving towards the window. He leapt through the window and activated hover. Hover has been activated. Gustav flew several hundred feet into the air and found out there was a barrier up ahead, so he floated in midair at this point and stared at the massive main Vertigan household from this height. God Eyes has been activated. Gustav knew there was no way the emblem would be hidden in the house, but he still decided to leave no loose ends and scanned every nook and cranny of the house from above using God Eyes. After doing so, he turned around and flew off. Swoosh, Gustav traveled across the air for a few hundred feet before dropping to the ground to walk. Flyei, two massive draconic creatures blazed across the sky with immense speed with their flapping wings making loud wind-breaking noises. This was a normal occurrence here, as almost every single Vertigan could fly after transformation. The skies would always be filled with these draconic beings flying across the place. Gustav didn't want to arouse any suspicions since he was flying in human form without wings, so he figured using land would be a better option. He proceeded to start scanning household to household across the Vertigan premises with the card in his grasp. It would take some time for him to completely scan the entire premises because it was like a small city in itself. After this, he would still have to move out and scan the city. He's in Mycenite City right now. The raspy, masculine voice of a dark, cloaked figure rang out as he knelt behind a man dressed in a blue business suit. It doesn't matter. He poses no threat to us without his teacher here. The man in a blue business suit voiced out. You do not wish to have him killed anymore? The voice of the cloaked figure rang out with a tone of surprise. Not right now. We should be more focused on the task at hand. Instead, watch Jack and report his every movement to me. The man in a blue business suit commanded. This is a high-ranking assignment, Sir Young. The pay will have to be increased, the cloaked figure voiced out. Just get the job done, young Joe stated before he began walking away. Time to proceed with the next step of this operation. Jack is not so attentive compared to Amy. The most dangerous and alarming part has already been scaled through before his arrival, so getting rid of Amy paid off. So long as he doesn't catch on, everything will continue to go smoothly. Young had a crafty look on his face as he thought while walking away. Chapter 875 Stark's inexplicable strength. Time to proceed with the next step of this operation. Jack is not so attentive compared to Amy. The most dangerous and alarming part has already been scaled through before his arrival, so getting rid of Amy paid off. So long as he doesn't catch on, everything will continue to go smoothly. Young had a crafty look on his face as he thought while walking away. Two buff figures in dark bodysuit-like outfits phased out of the dark and followed after Young as he walked away in the middle of this dark and dodgy-looking underground space. Mycenite City in a flash. 2 days had already gone by. Gustav had spent all this time scanning across the city from house to house, leaving no stone unturned. The other day, while checking the houses of the other branches of the family, Gustav had overheard some rumors about Stark. Stark was quite powerful for a mixed blood of his age, but even his own family barely saw him. It had been rumored that he was not only antisocial, but also liked to engage in rather strange activities. Whenever he was seen, it would be with different technological items. He barely attended training sessions with the rest of the family. Yet not only was his strength still crazily improving, but he would always come to test out weird items on the training grounds whenever he was seen. It was like he had a passion for other things, and not the affairs of his family or their current state. This made most branch family members believe he was unserious with the title of the next family head. The previous family head died due to an incurable mixed blood illness about 7 years ago. He was also Stark's father and Madame Lillian's husband. Ever since his death, Madame Lillian had been the acting head due to Stark's young age. Stark's father was said to have been the serious type who had been dabbling in the family affairs since he was little. Some branch members of the family were dissatisfied seeing that his son, who happened to be their next family head, was the polar opposite. Stark's father would always attend training, family meetings, and even reached a high level of their lineage bloodline mastery, becoming a two-headed at the age of 30. For the Vertigo family, there were 3 levels to their lineage bloodline: one-headed, two-headed, and three-headed transformation. The most powerful form for a Vertigan was the three-headed, and being that powerful brought about respect from other members of the family. Most Vertigons never even managed to become two-headed all their lives, and achieving the three-headed form was something that only the head of the families had been able to do for the last 1,000 years with the assistance of the emblem. While it was possible to achieve the three-headed form without the emblem, it was immensely difficult, and it would take a Vertigan all their lives to get to such a point, but once a new head was picked, so long as they had achieved the two-headed form, the emblem would be able to upgrade them to the three-headed form instantly. However, achieving the two-headed form in itself was no minuscule task. Even Stark's father only managed to achieve such at the age of 30, and there were even previous family heads who got to the ages of 50 to 100 before achieving the two-headed form. This common knowledge is what makes everyone still astonished about Stark today, even though he was the opposite of what the family wanted in terms of personality. Stark had achieved the two-headed form from the age of 15, becoming one of the strongest in the entire main household. He was paired with others that were older in a duel that happened 2 years back, and he defeated every single one of them. No one could understand how someone who was barely trained was able to achieve this. He was eligible to become the next family head since he was 15, but he was still too young, so the rest of the main family members decided to push the date till was 18. Stark turned 18 about a month back, which was also when the emblem went missing. It was obvious at this point that this was some sort of conspiracy to stop Stark from becoming the next head. Even though Madame Lillian had been the acting family head for 7 years now, there had been silent unrest and low exclaims of dissatisfaction amongst the family members. She couldn't pair with the emblem because she was a woman and also not the true next family head, so controlling the others with the power of the emblem was impossible. With the support of the main family members, she had been in authority, but she knew very well that Stark had to become the family head soon to quell any blossoming unrest. At this point, even though Gustav hadn't found the emblem, he had already made investigations to the point that he knew all of the branches of the Vertigan family who were secretly dissatisfied with Stark becoming the next head. Now he had his eyes on the movement of a particular family branch and was watching the head of that family branch at the moment. Different Vertigan family branches were tasked with different responsibilities to keep the city flourishing, especially the top-ranked ones, and this particular branch, Calder, was number 4. They handled the infrastructural companies the Vertigan family owned in the city, which of course dealt with building projects. This particular task brought a thought to Gustav's mind. Handling the infrastructure also means they have the capability to hide something underground without the notice of anyone. They have absolute control in this field. There was something else that linked with this thought. Gustav couldn't find the emblem even after searching across the city for 2 days, but the card he had gotten from Mara would not react to the location of the emblem if it was underwater or buried underneath the earth. Today, Gustav followed the family head around, observing his activities and movements all across the city. He supervised several places where projects were ongoing in the city before returning to his office to stay there for the rest of the day. Gustav was unable to obtain any kind of information, but he decided to infiltrate the office within the infrastructural company building. This was a city of mostly powerful mixed bloods, but there were still normal people who lived in the city besides the Vertigons, even though they were not allowed within the Vertigan premises. Gustav had to disguise himself using the identity of a worker to get in. He found his way to the office after some time moving around and hiding his presence at certain points. Vertigons, even though they were not allowed within the Vertigan premises. Gustav had to disguise himself using the identity of a worker to get in. Gustav proceeded to plant a tapping device in the office of this branch family head before leaving. He decided he was going to do this to every one of his suspects and watch them closely from a fixed point. He arrived back in the room he was given later on and started to make new plans after setting up a monitoring screen that was displaying footage from the location he had just tapped. Chapter 876 Nightfall Actions. He arrived back in the room he was given later on and started to make new plans after setting up a monitoring screen that was displaying footage from the location he had just tapped. Thinking about it now, he felt he would need to tap not just the locations they were expected to be at, but themselves as well. I need to be able to see where they are at every given time, Gustav thought. Using life signs tracking would help him see them at certain moments, but using it extensively would drain him of energy, so it wasn't a wise option. I might need to make use of that last resort, but then I will have to make sure I am not spotted while doing it, Gustav voiced out loud as he pulled a 5-feet-long weapon out of his storage ring. It was like a sniper weapon, but it glowed a dark blue color and gave off a weird kind of energy. We'll just need to replace the energy shots and wait for dark, Gustav said as he started to tweak the weapon. He pulled out a blade hidden at the top area and took off the scope as well. He wouldn't be needing that since his eyesight was good enough. After finishing up the necessary change, Gustav was ready to move out, but he still wanted to wait for nightfall first. The only problem should be getting the main family members. Bila is a Delta rank. There is a low possibility of getting him with this. Gustav thought about the only problem currently since Bila was the strongest amongst the main family members. The two Vertigons who were Alfranked mixed bloods were not from the main family, but they had the title's protectors since they protected the main family for generations. They were mostly not seen on the surface unless there was a huge problem that required their strength, and currently only one of them was on the island. Right now there was no huge problem that required strength, and they couldn't handle the current situation Gustav was investigating, so he didn't have to worry about them. The main household had some type of barrier, so he couldn't target the members of the household in whatever he was planning at the moment. He'd have to focus on just the family branch members and leaders he was suspicious of. Nightfall arrived soon and Gustav jumped out the window before flying halfway across Mycenite City. Calm, calm, calm. Knocks were heard at his door a moment later. Officer Crimson, are you there? Calm, calm, calm. The knock mixed with the tone of a masculine figure rang out for several seconds before stopping. I guess he's busy again. It's been 3 days since anyone last heard from him, Stark sighed as he voiced out. I really wanted to spend more time in his company, Stark muttered as he stared at Gustav's door with a slightly dissatisfied look. He had a small breeze-like sound as he turned around to walk away. Stark had a suspicious look as he turned back to stare at the door with his eyes turning yellow with a mixture of red. No, this is wrong. I shouldn't use my powers this way. He could be naked or something, Stark said as the glow in his eyes began to dim. But what if he's in trouble? I need to be sure he's okay, so just one peek. Stark gulped down saliva as his eyes glowed up again. His sight turned cloudy, and all of a sudden, he could see 360 degrees within Gustav's room. He left the window open. There's enough air conditioning within the room to keep it at the best temperature level, Stark mumbled with a suspicious look. Besides, mixed bloods at this level of strength would be unaffected by any sort of change in temperature unless it was very severe. It's empty. This is probably how he has been sneaking out to conduct investigations, Stark said with a look of realization. It's past 11 p.m. What would he be up to by this time? Stark mumbled with a tone of interest. In a few moments, he began walking away. Stark avoided everyone's eyes and found his way out of the household before making a turn around the house. He arrived in front of the area where Gustav's room windows could be seen above on the second floor and stared at the one that was opened. Stark traced the open window with his eyes turning to stare at a particular direction in the sky. Golden scales began to appear on his body as he bloated and began to increase in size. His clothes got ripped off as another neck grew out the side of his shoulder that was also transforming like the rest of his body to look like a beastly figure. A pair of wings 2 times bigger than ancient aeroplanes' wings sprouted out of his back as he grew to over 16 feet in height. Powerful energy spread forth across the place as he finished his transformation. What could be seen here was a massive golden scales draconic with 2 long heads, 4 horns, and blazing yellowish eyes with hints of red. Stark's transformation looked so majestic and domineering that Vaughn's transformation in his past fight with Gustav could not be compared to this. Spreading his wings out, he flapped hard, causing wind to spread across the place as he almost instantly disappeared into the southwest part of the sky. Gustav was currently standing at the top of a bridge-like rail, track suspended several thousand feet in the air. He squatted on this rail area in midair despite it having thin metal poles and brought out the sniper-like weapon from his storage device. First location is approximately 40 miles from here, Gustav mumbled as he placed the weapon on a standing railing area and locked his finger around the trigger. God Eyes has been activated. Chapter 877 Shooting at the Targets. First location is approximately 40 miles from here, Gustav mumbled as he placed the weapon on a standing railing area and locked his finger around the trigger. God Eyes has been activated. His sight zoomed in by several kilometers in a matter of seconds. It passed through structures and multiple tall buildings up ahead. It passed through some business buildings and some residential areas, yet it kept phasing forward till it went beyond a small forest area. Gustav stopped his sight from zooming in any further after it arrived within a household where the family were already asleep in their various rooms. He moved his sight from the living room to the upper floor where he could spot 3 people sleeping in 3 separate rooms at first. Then he moved his sight further to the left where the last room was located. Here he could see 2 people sleeping on the same bed together, a male and a female. It was obvious that they were husband and wife, and most likely the parents of the ones sleeping in the other rooms. Fortunately, they were not engaging in any triggering activities, just as Gustav hoped. Gustav proceeded to move the weapon he was holding onto slightly, pointing it precisely in the direction he wanted it to head in. His sight was focused on the neck area of the man who was sleeping right beside his wife. Gustav's hand glowed with bluish energy that was transferred towards the weapon, which in turn glowed a little. "It has to be hard, but at the same time gentle," Gustav said internally as he slowly pressed his finger against the trigger. Thwun, a compressed firing sound rang out as the sniper-like weapon shot out a small yellowish-shaped item with immense speed. It almost instantly traveled across the 40 miles and passed through all the obstacles along the way effortlessly. Thwaya, the man suddenly woke up as he felt a sting on his neck. He reached out to touch his neck, but besides the small sting that only lasted for an instant, he couldn't feel anything else. There was no blood oozing down his neck or anything. However, there was a visible small yellowish on the left side of his neck. Just as he was about to stand up to check a mirror, a wave of drowsiness hit him and he fell back to the bed before passing out. In the next few seconds, the yellowish on his neck disappeared entirely. 1 down. 6 more to go, Gustav said internally as he deactivated God Eyes. He had just successfully planted an unknown item in one of his suspects who happened to be a kilo-ranked mixed blood. The Vertigan man was a family branch head known as Moxitov and was pretty strong, but Gustav had managed to get him due to good planning. Not only was he extremely far away, but the Vertigan also would not have been able to figure out what was going on because of the high-grade sedative added to the shot. This would make any victim fall asleep immediately, and every trace or sign that something had happened would have disappeared when they woke up the next morning. Gustav wasted no time in getting up after retracting his weapon and leaping off the sky rail. Hover has been activated. He activated hover in mid-air and flew across the city. Fwyi, his figure generated whitish waves across the night sky as he blasted across the air. Gustav wanted to move as far as possible from the previous location due to the suppressed sound the weapon made after he fired it off previously. There were no MBO officials in Mycenite City, but there were Vertigan guards stationed all across the place in multiple locations. Despite the sound being suppressed, the ones patrolling that particular area would have caught on to it and begun heading in the direction of the sound. A few minutes later, Gustav arrived over 15 miles southwest of his initial location. God Eyes made Gustav capable of targeting anyone in the city from almost any point, but due to obstructions from structures or platforms, he would have to pick strategic locations. He knew too many obstructions would hinder the shots from getting through smoothly, no matter how strong the firing power of the weapon was, so he knew to pick the right spots. This time Gustav settled on the top of a tower-like platform on a bridge. There was a big rift below that looked endless. This was a big crack on one side of the island. It made this particular location look a bit scary considering water couldn't be seen at the bottom since it looked bottomless. Gustav squatted and mounted the sniper-like weapon once more while activating God Eyes. God Eyes has been activated. The night turned clearer in his line of sight as he began zooming in. 27 miles away. This time the distance between Gustav's current location and the location he was aiming for was significantly shorter. His sight kept zooming past several structures till it arrived in a neighborhood-like area with multiple houses around. A similar scene to what had earlier played out. The only differences were the location, number of people in this particular household, and the target. Gustav was able to successfully hit the target once more, smoothly downing the second one. He wasted no time in moving away from this location, as well as he pictured the map of the city in his head. Gustav didn't keep God Eyes active at every point, so he had to make use of his perception to move around as well as a GPS. Over 30 minutes later, Gustav was floating in midair on the far west area of the island. He was so much at the edge that the ocean surrounding the island was just right beneath him. This won't work unless I find a platform that is at least 3,000 feet high around here, Gustav muttered as his sight zoomed out of a particular location. Looks like he'll have to take this shot in midair. Chapter 878, Raising an Alarm. Looks like he'll have to take this shot in midair. After saying this, Gustav flew higher into the sky, ascending across the air with the weapon in his grasp. After reaching up to 3,000 feet in the air, Gustav paused and held out the sniper-like weapon right in front of him. God Eyes has been activated. His sight zoomed in heavily into the distance as he aimed the weapon forward with a steady grasp. 32 miles, Gustav said internally as his sight kept zooming in for several seconds. His sight closed in on a mountain region. 3 different mountains side by side could be seen, as well as series of buildings erected on them. Gustav aimed for the first building on the tallest mountain of all 3, which was positioned right in the middle. There were several people in guards' outfits positioned around the place. Some patrolled up and down the mountains, but they had no idea that they were being watched from over 30 miles away. Gustav looked inside the building he was aiming for and could see a few people already asleep. However, the person he was targeting happened to be missing from this household. Gustav began to look from household to household, since he couldn't find this person in the expected location. The person who happened to be the leader of this family branch was nowhere to be found amongst the multiple buildings erected across the 3 mountains. Gustav felt he spotted something and looked higher up the mountain. There was a faint speck of light that shone from up there for a split instant. He looked further up, at the highest part of the mountain in the middle, and found someone seating in a cross-legged position atop it. This was the person Gustav was looking for, family branch head Kotorio. He seemed to be channeling his bloodline as he sat up there, because there would be an occasional red glow in the middle of his chest area. He's awake. This will make things a bit tougher, Gustav thought as he aimed for the neck area of this man. Kotorio was a betranked mixed blood, so this had made things entirely more difficult than before since he wasn't asleep. Although being in a state where he was channeling his bloodline made him a little more vulnerable, but nevertheless, he was still conscious. Being asleep raised the success rate of this operation by a whole lot. For all Gustav knew, he could even get spotted before he took the shot. Beta ranks were no ordinary mixed bloods since they were just at the rank before Alpha. Alpha rank was a whole new godlike rank entirely, but with Beta being 1 rank away, they would be able to floor any lower-ranked mixed blood easily, and Gustav was no exception. He would have to make sure things went swimmingly, or he would be found out. Gustav's eyes focused on the neck area of this branch leader, and finally, he took the shot. Bang! Bang! Instead of once, Gustav took the shot twice. 2 yellowish-colored lines cut through the air at immense speed, following after each other and arriving at the target of 30 miles in almost an instant. Gaiuyu, an invisible circular barrier, suddenly appeared around Kotorio as the first shot arrived before him. Cracks appeared around it, but the yellowish, which was the item shot out, was stopped right before him. In the next instant, he opened his eyes and looked forward with a sharp gaze. But then the second shot arrived almost in a split instant after the first shot was stopped. It slammed into the exact area with the first one, breaking through the barrier and moving towards Kotorio's neck. His hand moved with lightning speed as he raised it slightly with index and thumb spread. He caught the small yellowish item right before it could make contact with his neck and raised it slightly to stare at it. He gritted his teeth in annoyance as the yellowish item dissolved into a small cream on his fingertips. It came from, just as he opened his mouth. A yellowish streak suddenly appeared right in front of him, just an inch away from his mouth that was opened. He tried to close his mouth back in time, but it was too late. Bang! He felt a force slam into the back of his throat in the next instant, sending him flying a few feet backwards. Its presence and visibility were masked. Kotorio voiced out with a shocked look as the shot dissolved into his throat. Just how skilled is this culprit that he was able to mask even the bullet? He thought internally as he staggered slightly after regaining his balance. But he's not here to kill me. I will find him and make him confess his intentions. Kotorio voiced out as a massive pressure phased out of him, causing the mountains to quake slightly. Everyone in the vicinity began to wake up as they felt the powerful pressure he exuded. They could already tell that something was wrong and began to make their way toward him. However, just as Coterio was about to transform and take flight into the sky to chase after the culprit, he felt a wave of dizziness overtake him. Those who had just arrived at his position after getting the alarm saw him staggering and trying to keep his eyes open. They had no idea what had happened, and seeing him in such a state made them think it was an ambush, but there was no one in the vicinity. Before falling to the ground on the mountain top, Coterio pointed in a direction. In the next instant, he had fallen asleep. Branch leader, one of them voiced out while checking his vitals on the ground. He found out that Coterio was not hurt in any way. He just fell asleep. The culprit must have gone that way. Another one of them voiced out as he pointed in the same direction Coterio had pointed at before he passed out. Chapter 879 Tracking Gustav. They were about 12 that had arrived at the summit, and they understood this as well. In the next instant, they began to transform into a draconic form with black scales. Flapping their wings, they lifted off into the sky and began to fly in the direction of Gustav. They felt whoever the culprit was, they would be no easy foe since they were able to get the branch leader. However, they had no idea that the shot came from over 30 miles away. They would never expect that the culprit would be that far away, so while they flew across the air, their focus was mostly a few miles ahead beyond their territory. Gustav, who was over 30 miles away, had already begun to move away from the instant he successfully made the third shot. The supergrade sedatives within the bullet were enough to put him down despite being a beta rank, so long as it managed to dissolve on his skin. Gustav wasn't so sure if it would work when they were in their draconic form, since they had won the toughest defense in the world with their lineage bloodline. However, so long as they were in human form, it would work, which was why going on this operation in the middle of the night was the best course of action. Gustav had expected one or two situations where his target would be awake, but at the very least, since it was late at night, he expected their guard to be down. That was the case for Coterio too, even though he was awake and channeling his bloodline. As Gustav flew across the air towards a different location, heading towards the east, he felt fluctuations in the air. VRRRHHHHHHH, he spread out his perception across the place, making it cover a radius of up to 10 miles. Gustav could sense two figures flying towards his direction from the west area. Over there, I can sense his presence. He heard a masculine voice coming from the same direction. God Eyes has been activated. Gustav turned towards the direction where he could sense them as he activated God Eyes. Guards. They must have followed me from the previous location, Gustav said internally as he spotted these figures in his line of sight. These weren't the same people from the triple mountainous area. Gustav guessed these guards must have been patrolling not too far from where he took the shot earlier, but he must have missed them because they were probably out of his perception range. The issue now was these guards were very good at tracking, having followed him to this point despite hearing the shot from outside his range of perception. And even now they were about to catch up to him since they were moving way faster. Gustav would increase his speed, but based on what he had heard from the dialogue between both guards, he could tell that they would be able to pinpoint his location even better if he decided to use more speed, and then this would turn into a midnight chase. He didn't want to risk raising more alarms, which would make more guards join in. Gustav looked down and could see he was above an area of tall buildings. Flying towards one of them, he landed at the top and stared at a square-shaped electrical appliance by the side. Gustav looked around the rooftop and could see others like that placed in specific spots of the rooftop. Cognitive concealment has been activated. His presence disappeared as he moved towards the middle of the rooftop. He activated one of his original bloodline abilities, causing his body to start making small squirming sounds as he morphed. In the next few moments, Gustav had transformed into the same look as one of these square-shaped appliances. Gustav spread his perception across the place after taking this inanimate form and could sense the two guards approaching this particular location even though his presence had disappeared. There was no doubt that their tracking ability was top-notch. The flapping of wings turned louder, and in the next few moments, two gigantic-looking draconic figures with ash-colored scales could be seen approaching this 200-story tall building. They landed right atop it and transformed back into their human form. Gustav had no idea how they did it, but even after going from massive back to their human form, they were still dressed in their black and silver-colored guard robes. The transformation didn't affect their wares in any way. The presence vanished around here. I believe the culprit should be hiding somewhere. The one on the left voiced out. They might be able to conceal themselves. We should use the overseer device. The one on the right stated with a feminine voice. Just as one of them brought out what looked like a brownish stone, a call came in through the communication device placed behind their left ear. There seems to have been a disturbance at branch leader Kotorios area, the female guard stated. The direction pinpointed leads to the position where we heard the shot. It's over 30 miles away. Could the culprit be responsible for the situation at branch leader Kotorios area? While they spoke, Gustav began to sense another presence approaching this particular area. Another one? Gustav was surprised that another draconic figure was approaching from the south. However, unlike this too, he could sense this one was faster and stronger since it carried a more domineering presence. Gustav wasn't really bothered because unlike before, he could maintain transforming into an inanimate object for longer than 2 minutes. He only hoped they'd leave soon since they were starting to link him to the place he targeted. Let's use the overseer device. It will make it faster to find the culprit. The female guard spoke again as she stretched it forward. Just as she was about to activate it, both of them sensed the presence approaching from the south. Someone's coming, the male guard voiced out as he looked up. Fwyi. In the next instant, a two-headed golden-scaled draconic figure could be seen approaching from the south. Chapter 880 Stark's arrival. Even in the dark night, the clouds parted ways due to the incredible speed of this creature as its golden scales glowed and gave off a majestic aura. Isn't that? Both guards' eyes widened in surprise the instant they spotted the draconic figure. Bam! It landed a few feet in front of them and began transforming back into human form. Family head Stark? The male guard voiced out loudly. Not the family head yet, haha. Stark laughed lightly as he approached them. Both guards greeted him with respect as their faces still shone with disbelief. What are you two doing around these parts? Patrolling? Stark asked as he arrived in front of them. We were tracking a presence we felt. The female guard began explaining everything to Stark and what had happened so far. Gustav, who was still in the inanimate form, was slowly starting to reach his limit after maintaining it for over 10 minutes. He reckoned he could still hold out for longer, but with Stark arriving on the scene, he had no idea how his presence would affect the whole situation. He'd rather not have to keep maintaining this form, as it was pretty dangerous to stay this way for too long. Oh, I see. Stark voiced out after listening to their narration. We were just about to scan this place with an overseer device, the female guard added while stretching her hand forward with the brownish stone in her grasp. There is no need to bother with that. I was the one at the location where you heard the sound of a shot earlier, Stark voiced out with a dismissive tone while grabbing onto the device. That was you? Both guards voiced out in shock. Yes, that was me. As you can see, I'm also right here. I was busy with an exercise that has to do with the channeling of my bloodline, so those sounds came from my body, Stark added. Both guards looked at themselves for a split instant with contemplative expressions before looking back at Stark. Whoever or whatever the situation at the other branch, it must have been someone else, so you two are searching in the wrong place, Stark stated once more. All right, family head. Since that was you, well, check somewhere else, the female guard voiced out first. You two do that. Keep up the good work, I'll continue with my exercise in the meantime, Stark said with a smile. Both of them nodded respectfully and turned around while transforming. Don't forget this. Stark threw the brownish-looking stone-like device across the air. One of them caught it in mid-air, before flapping their wings and flying off into the distance. Stark sighed in relief after they left and turned around. They're gone. You don't have to keep hiding, Stark voiced out while staring at a particular part of the rooftop. There was no response for some time, even after saying that. Come on, I know you're here. They would have too if they had used the device, but not to worry, everything is okay now, Stark said while walking towards the middle of the rooftop. He arrived in front of one of the square-shaped appliances on the rooftop and looked down at it. I'm 99% sure this is you, disguising, Stark voiced out while staring at the appliance. Looks like the 1% wins, a voice was heard from behind. Huh. Stark quickly turned around with a startled look and saw Gustav standing right behind him. I was wrong? How did he creep up on me so fast? Stark wondered internally with an astonished look as he stared at Gustav, then turned to the side slightly to stare at the appliance once again. He then noticed one of the square-shaped appliances positioned a few feet behind was no longer there. It turned out he had missed Gustav. Why are you here? Gustav asked with an unbothered expression. Ouch, no thanks for saving me, Stark, or anything. Stark voiced out with a wry smile. I would have handled it, but yeah, thanks, Gustav said. I don't doubt that, hee. You see, I've been following you all night, Stark said with a chuckle while walking in a funny way around Gustav. That's impossible, Gustav said while his eyebrows creased. He didn't sense Stark's presence in the slightest. Well, I kept my distance because from what I know about you, I'd get caught if I followed too closely, but even with keeping my distance, I was still able to follow you easily, Stark explained. Gustav's eyebrows furrowed even more after hearing that. If Stark had been following, then he must have seen everything that had happened, and Gustav wanted to keep all of his plans private. I know whatever you're up to is for the sake of getting the emblem back, so I don't mind. You just have to be careful. They would have been able to identify you with the Overseer device, which would, in turn, cause problems and affect your work, Stark said with a smile. How was he able to keep his distance while following me? Gustav wondered. All right, thanks. You should head back now. I am not done, Gustav said while turning around to head towards the edge of the rooftop. Wait. Let me come with you, Stark said while quickly following after Gustav. No, Gustav refused bluntly. I can help. Something like this might happen again, but I'll be able to keep the guards off you, Stark voiced out quickly before Gustav could leap off the edge. You're just gonna keep following me, even if I said no, wouldn't you? Gustav mumbled while his eyes dropped. Yes. I mean no. Stark chuckled lightly with a wry look as he responded. I can be of help, he added. *I**, all right, Gustav sighed before leaping off the edge. Hover has been activated. Gustav blasted across the dark sky with speed as Stark also transformed into his draconic form. An immense pressure radiated across the environment as he flapped his massive wings, flying after Gustav and catching up with ease. Chapter 881. See all abilities. An immense pressure radiated across the environment as he flapped his massive wings, flying after Gustav and catching up with ease. Gustav could not understand why Stark gave off so much pressure with his draconic transformation when he was just a first-step echo rank. With the way his draconic transformation looked with 2 heads, 6 eyes, and golden glowing scales, Gustav felt, just like him, Stark would most likely be able to battle mixed bloods at higher-ranked bloodlines and still win. No one still understood how he achieved echo rank at age 18 and was also a 2-headed since 7 years ago. Stark was happy as he followed by Gustav's side, flying alongside him. He had always wanted to do something like this, and now he had the chance. He wondered how Gustav was able to fly without wings, but he didn't know Gustav would run out of time soon and have to use transformation to take the form of a winged mixed breed. How were you able to keep following me despite being out of my range of perception? Gustav asked. It's the same way I found out you were not in your room, Stark responded with a deep voice that had been affected by his transformation. I believe there were no cameras or spying devices in my room. I checked. Gustav furrowed his brows as he voiced out. No, there are none. Stark quickly responded to the misunderstanding. I have a see all ability. Even right now, one of my eyes is fixed on a part of the island far behind us. Another of my eyes see over 50 miles ahead of us. I am only making use of 2 to scan around us as we fly, Stark explained. Is see all ability? Gustav mumbled. Like God eyes. Only that this one seems to work in a different way and might be better, Gustav thought. He also recalled Alevra had a similar eye ability to God eyes, but God eyes seemed to be better, unlike this particular see all ability Stark uses. Seeing from that far away and even seeing behind him, this definitely made it better than God eyes. Don't worry, I'll never use it in the household to invade your privacy unless I feel something out of place. I was worried this night, which was why I used it, Stark assured Gustav after he saw his contemplative. Fine. Gustav responded as bat-like wings sprouted out of his back. Stark was taken aback for an instant as Gustav's flight speed suddenly increased exponentially. Flyyi with a flap of his wings, he gave himself and Stark a distance of several thousand meters. Oh, a race? Be ready to eat the clouds behind me. Stark chuckled as he also flapped his wings and blasted forward with immense speed. Despite the size of his figure, he almost instantly caught up with Gustav as they flew towards the northeast of the island. About 15 minutes later, Gustav stood on a purple branch tree that was over 1,400 meters tall. This was the tallest tree on the island, and they called it the Athraya. It was a strange type of tree that not only gave off an energy across the island that benefited bloodline channeling for mixed bloods, but it also generated a strange type of electrical current. This made it unapproachable for a lot of people, but even with that, it was a treasure on the island and people were not allowed to approach recklessly. There are a few guards in this area, Stark muttered. You'll handle it, right? Gustav voiced out. Sure I will, Stark responded. Gustav brought out the sniper-like weapon, which he had just used several minutes ago. Before arriving here, they had visited a different location and Gustav had successfully hit the 5th target. Now he was targeting the 6th and last family branch head of them all. This was not a safe spot since the area was well guarded, but this was the best place to take a shot from because of the next family branch head location. Gustav activated God Eyes, once more zooming in across several 10 miles. An exalted platform above a region with a lot of fog could be seen. Gustav aimed properly at this area where different houses could be seen. His eyes focused on the second to the last house on the 5th row of structures aligned. His sight moved downwards, going below the house, and he spotted a figure underground laying on what seemed to be a mat. It was like Gustav already expected this, so he was well prepared despite the fact that the shot would have to travel underground. Zing, a yellowish-colored-looking item, thrice the size of the projectiles he had been shooting since appeared in his hand, and Gustav proceeded to put it into the weapon. His hands glowed with a blue light as he passed power into the weapon and aimed it at the figure once more. Here goes. He proceeded to pull the trigger. Boom. Thwack, the yellowish streak tore through the air instantly, as well as every single obstacle on the way as it arrived at the target. Thwai, it instantly phased through the structure and pierced into the target's neck. The branch leader instantly opened his eyes the moment contact was made, but he was too slow. He touched his neck and felt the liquid, brought his hand to the front of his face, and could see part of the yellowish melted projectile on his hand. What the? His eyes turned dizzy and he passed out in the next instant. This branch head was significantly weaker than the rest, being only at kilo rank, so Gustav found it easier to target him. They're coming this way. Stark alerted Gustav of the guards. Gustav backed himself into the tree, covered himself with the branches, and activated cognitive concealment. He also turned into the same color with the tree. Despite the fact that the tree was sending out electric currents, he remained unaffected and hid in it. Chapter 882. Using Stark to achieve some objectives. Who's there? A loud masculine voice was heard from the ground area as multiple footsteps approached the bottom of the tree. Stark moved a bit forward, dropping from the end of a branch. Flyyi, his body descended from the air, and he landed a few feet in front of the tree trunk. The guards who were surrounding the tree paused in their tracks as they spotted him. Family head Stark, their eyes widened as they voiced out. Once again. Not yet, haha. Stark chuckled as he corrected them. He didn't like hearing people call him the family head. What are you doing here? One of them asked with a surprised tone. Just busy with some training of mine. Is there any problem? He asked while raising one of his eyebrows. We just heard a disturbance from over here, so we came to check. One of them answered with a respectful tone. Oh yeah, that was me. Nothing to worry about, Stark stated with a smile. Okay, family head, but you need to be careful. There have been a lot of disturbances this night. We can escort you back to the residence for safety, another one of the guards voiced out. Oh, not to worry, I am fine. When I am done here, I will head back, Stark said with a dismissive tone. They nodded in response. We will keep searching for the culprit responsible for the disturbances, the guards voiced out as they prepared to leave. As for the disturbances, I could help search for the culprit, Stark proposed. We can't disturb family head with our duties. We will handle it ourselves, a guard voiced out. It is no big deal. I have the see-all ability. I can check every nook and cranny of the island in a short duration of time, Stark said as his eyes glowed with yellowish and red light. The guards waited for a bit, and after about a minute Stark's eyes dimmed, returning to normal. I have checked everywhere. There is no suspicious figure. Whoever you guys are looking for must have already escaped, Stark voiced out. All right then, family head, please be safe, they voiced out before leaving the vicinity. Stark smiled after they were gone and leapt upwards. He jumped from tree to tree before arriving where Gustav was hiding. Did you truly scan the entire island with your sight? Gustav asked. Of course not. What's the point when the culprit is right here? Stark laughed lightly in response. But can you truly do that? Gustav asked with a tone of curiosity. Yes. It's a rare ability that no one in the family has possessed for ages. I can scan every nook and cranny of this island in a matter of seconds, so if any suspicious figure ever truly appeared, they would not be able to escape my eyes, Stark explained. So if you lots had been around when the emblem was stolen, you'd have caught the culprit? Gustav asked. Yes, they knew to pick the right time to act, Stark added. In a flash, noon had arrived. Gustav had been in his room all day since he arrived back at the residence at midnight with Stark. He had managed to complete his objective by night, so right now he was staying indoors after setting up his monitoring system. What Gustav had planted within the 6 family branch heads was a kind of technological implant that would give an imagery of their location every time. Right in front of Gustav at the moment was a massive holographic screen split in 6. These 6 holographic screens displayed not just the locations of the 6 family branch heads he targeted the previous night, but also displayed footage of the environment around them. This had gone beyond tapping a certain location. This would display everything they were up to at the moment and also send audio feedbacks to Gustav. The only issue now was Gustav would have to wait because his acts the previous night had alarmed the entire island. Amongst all of them he targeted, family branch leader Coterio was the only one that remembered what had happened the previous night. The others had forgotten that they were shot at since they were not as powerful as him. However, even though they forgot, they still felt suspicious after hearing what happened to Coterio. They had begun conducting investigations and examined his body. The other leaders also decided to join in this examination just in case. On the bright side, the implant couldn't be spotted by any medical device on this island, unless they decided to take them to the best medical research center in the world. Gustav only just had to wait in the meantime till the whole thing blew over. He recalled he also had to find a way to get the others in the main family to consume the implant as well. There were some he could still watch while being in the household, but some had duties that made them go out a lot, so he had to make them consume the implant so he'd be able to easily spy on them when they were away. The problem with this investigation was that there were too many suspects, and this was due to the number of people in the Vertigan family. After some time, Gustav finally decided to come out of his room. Surprisingly, he bumped into Stark in the hallway. It seemed Stark was coming to find him. You haven't had breakfast? Stark voiced out the moment he arrived in front of Gustav. However, Gustav remained silent for a few moments, as his face displayed a contemplative expression. I'm going to need you to help me with something, Stark, Gustav voiced out. Okay. You know you can ask me anything, Stark said with a slightly surprised expression. Good. Follow me, Gustav said while walking forward. Stark turned around and quickly followed after Gustav with an excited expression. The entire day went by in a flash, and it was nightfall again. At this time, Gustav was sitting in his room, and now the holographic screen had become even larger. Chapter 883. Underwater mission. Instead of 6 split screens, it was now 12. These 12 holographic screens each displayed the surroundings of a person. Some were asleep and some were still wide awake, but from the looks of things, all of them were in a bedroom. 6 of these screens displayed the branch leaders Gustav had targeted the previous night, and the other 6 were that of people in the main family that Gustav suspected. Stark is a good asset, Gustav mumbled as he recalled just how Stark had helped him today. He had made use of Stark's help to make the others he was suspicious of in the household consume the technological implant he needed to spy on them. If Gustav had tried it his way, it would have been quite difficult to achieve, but with Stark being the next head of the family, all he had to do was visit them one after the other with a cup of tea to discuss. The cup of tea had the technological implant in soluble form within. All of them were suspicious since this wasn't something Stark would usually do, but they had no choice. The moment they consumed the cup of tea, Gustav practically got what he wanted, so nothing else mattered. They had fallen into his hands at this point, and every activity they engaged in would be monitored by him easily. The only problem was Gustav couldn't stay here and watch all day, but it wasn't really an issue because all their activities would be recorded, and he could do a playback the moment he was back in his room. Later in the middle of the night, Gustav moved out of the household once more. This time he made sure everyone was asleep or in a relaxed state first before moving out to prevent what happened with Stark the last time from happening again. He could still be caught sneaking out since not everyone was sleeping at the moment. Uncle Bila was channeling his bloodline in one of the household training rooms, and even some other uncles and aunts that were busy working on one thing or the other in their rooms were still awake. However, Gustav was more cautious than the last time, so he wouldn't be caught by even the guards. After a few minutes, he was flying across the night sky in the city. The city mostly slept at night, unlike burning sands, so it was rare to see any activity on the ground. However, Gustav's mission this night was not on the ground. Partial Flame's Death Ace transformation has been activated. Big bat-like wings sprouted out of Gustav's back as his speed suddenly increased by a whole lot. He generated waves across the sky as he flew towards the north area of the island. Many minutes later, Gustav had arrived at the edge of the island. Since it's not on land, then I can't rule out the possibility of it being in the water, Gustav said internally as he floated several thousand feet in the air and stared at the ocean below. This might take some time. I should probably use the drug, Gustav said internally as he activated his storage device and made a bluish pill appear in his hand. This would make it possible for him to breathe underwater for the next 24 hours. Gustav could stay underwater for several hours without this, but he didn't know how long he would take scouring the surrounding of the island underwater, so he needed to use this. New quest has been issued. A notification suddenly popped up in his line of sight before he could consume the drug. Continue your search for the emblem underwater without the use of any underwater breathing drug. Gustav squinted his eyes as he saw this notification. Is the system purposely trying to make things hard for me? Gustav wondered internally, but there was no answer from the system. It had been silent for days like it usually was sometimes. Rewards, punishment for failure. The punishment for failing was enough for Gustav to put any thoughts of deciding not to complete the quest aside. TCH, Gustav proceeded to keep the drug back in his storage device after scanning through. The wings on his back receded, and he began to fall from the air. Fwyi, his black outfit made small flapping sounds as his body dropped quickly and landed inside the ocean. Tum, his body descended into the depths of the ocean as he activated God's eyes. Even during the day, the ocean underwater was always dimly lit, and now that it was nighttime, it was impossible to see anything. The surroundings became clearer the moment Gustav activated God's eyes. He descended deeper into the ocean while also swimming forward with force, causing waves to be generated underwater. A few fishes would be spotted occasionally as he swam forward around the island, but the waves his body generated would push them all away. It looked like he was even swimming faster than they were. Gustav kept scanning the entire premises with both God's eyes and his perception as he swam from place to place. Occasionally, he would come into contact with structures from the ocean floor shaped weirdly. Some looked like buildings that had been demolished because a little bit of their shape could be seen. Gustav would swim around them and scan them, but still, he didn't find anything. He would also make sure to scan the rocky walls of the island edges underwater, but even after 2 hours of moving around, he still hadn't found anything. The ocean was quite dangerous in these parts, and it was said that lots of underwater mixed breeds were super strong. It wasn't easy to defeat them, and they were said to be more dangerous than mixed breeds on land. Gustav knew of this info, so he made sure to move cautiously, and since he could see from miles away, it made things easier. Gustav once more approached another demolished-looking platform underwater. Chapter 884. Getting swallowed. Gustav once more approached another demolished-looking platform underwater. At this point, he was curious as to why some of the structures were erected underwater only to be destroyed. What could have destroyed them, or why were they built in the first place when the people from the Vertigons were supposed to be more knowledgeable in the aspect that underwater construction was not a good idea in this part of the world? Gustav reached down further and stood on the rubble. He could see woods, tiles, and different construction materials. He also spotted a massive metallic-looking cross stabbed into the ocean floor. What were they building? A church? Gustav wondered internally after spotting the massive cross. He could sense the top of the cross emitting faint energy, so he moved closer and inspected it. A ruby? Gustav spotted the small red stone embedded into the top area of the cross. It was barely visible. The visible area made the ruby look like a dot as part of it was covered up by the metallic upper part of the cross. Gustav reached out and touched it, dipping his fingers into the small hole the ruby was embedded in and pulling the metal that was covering it up to the sides. He easily ripped parts of the metal away, revealing the complete look of the ruby, which was almost as large as an adult's palm. The faint energy it emitted turned even stronger after the entirety of it was revealed. Gustav was about to use God Eyes to scan the ruby when a tremor suddenly happened on the ground floor of the ocean. He was barely able to react in time before immense waves thrashed across the place and an unprecedented suction force came from underneath. The whole rubble at the bottom of the ocean from the desolate structure blasted across the place as the ground floor opened up and a massive bottomless-looking hole swallowed up Gustav's figure from below. Grrrrhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhh floor, and the suction force coming from it had allowed it to swallow up everything in the vicinity, Gustav included. Gustav found himself getting pulled into this dark hole fiercely with the strong waves trying to render him unable to stabilize himself. Although the waves mixed with rubble were blinding to the eyes, Gustav was able to spot massive white-looking spikes at the far ends of the dark hole. It turned out that this dark, bottomless-looking hole was actually the mouth of an underwater mixed breed that had suddenly appeared out of nowhere and swallowed everything up. The hole, which happened to be its mouth, had closed up after swallowing everything in the vicinity, causing the entire place to turn dark. As Gustav found himself being dragged towards the digestive system of this creature, along with the rubble and many other fishes, he closed his eyes. Temperature manipulation has been activated. Steam drifted out of his nostrils and mouth as it slightly hung open. SHSSSSHHHHSSHHHHH. Frost began to spread across the place as the waves all across the place began to freeze up. The number of waves thrashing about the place was similar to the size of a river, and everything was turning into frost in a matter of seconds. With everything freezing up and turning solid, the heavy waves throwing Gustav across the place stopped, giving him the chance to leap upwards. The rubble and different parts of the demolished structure beneath were getting trapped in large ice blocks due to the ability Gustav had just used. This also stalled things within the body of the creature, delaying its digestive process. Gustav stood atop a frozen platform above and looked around. This creature was practically quarter the size of the island, but Gustav could see the grotesque and slimy-looking walls of its internal structure. The cross. Gustav looked around for the cross and couldn't find it. He noticed it had gotten buried deep down underneath all the frost. It was hundreds of feet below where he was currently standing on and close to getting melted down and digested. Even though the frost had slowed down the creature's digestive process, it didn't completely stop it, so if Gustav didn't do something right now, the cross as well as the ruby would get digested in a matter of seconds. Gustav looked around with God eyes still activated speedily. There, he muttered as he stared at his 2-0 clock. Tuhush, he leapt towards that direction with immense speed as massive bat wings sprouted out of his back. Power boost has been activated. He squinted his eyes as his fist lit up with a golden glow and his right arm began transforming. It grew twice as large, becoming even more muscular as spikes appeared around it, and it turned a bit silvery. The instant he arrived in front of the internal wall of this creature, he sent his fist hurling forward with intensity. Boom! A massive collision rocked the entire place as Gustav's fist tore through this creature's internal wall and kept flying through. Thrya, Pukarol, blood, and unknown liquid goo jetted out like a fountain as a loud shriek of pain reverberated across the ground floor of the ocean. Gustav didn't stop flying with his fist stretched forward as he kept tearing through the internal meaty wall of the creature, which was thicker than 40 walls joined together. The whole place was trembling as the creature trashed around due to the pain, but Gustav didn't change his trajectory once, since he was unaffected by gravitational force due to flight. He finally arrived on the other end of the wall after successfully tearing a hole in this creature's internals. Ba-dump, 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 ba-dump. A massive light, pinkish-looking meat of flesh with grayish tub-like things connected to it could be spotted the instant Gustav arrived on the other side. It was similar to the size of a mansion and kept pumping rapidly, causing a loud beating sound to reverberate across the entire place. Ultimate combination form has been activated. Gustav's body began transforming rapidly as he took the ultimate combination form, causing a dangerous energy to spread across the place. Chapter 885. Underwater map. The creature kept thrashing about after sensing danger within, trying to throw Gustav off course, but it was to no avail. After Gustav had taken the combination form, he blasted forward with immense speed. Boom! A loud noise reverberated across the bottom floor of the ocean as massive currents rose from the below to the top. Thwai, a massive ripple spread across the place as a hole was blasted open at the top of the ocean. A massive beating meat lump flying out of it in the next instant. It generated fierce waves across the water that thousands of fishes were getting flung into the sky. It started raining fish due to this. The big beating lump of flesh, which was the size of a mansion, had a massive hole in it which blood was jetting out from like a fountain. A portion of the ocean had been dyed red with blood. It landed somewhere on the shore of the island up ahead with a massive thudding sound and rolled a little. Thousands of feet beneath the ocean, Gustav floated above the massive body of a creature that was sinking after leaving a massive bloody hole on the side of its body. The creature was obviously dead since Gustav had just blasted its heart out of its massive body. Its mistake was trying to consume someone like Gustav, even though it was quite a powerful creature. Anyone would know that no matter how powerful a creature is, there would always be vulnerability within. The water in this part of the ocean had been polluted by its blood and leaking organs, but since Gustav wasn't inhaling or breathing out, this wasn't a problem. He used God eyes to scan the features of the creature as it fell to the ocean floor. The creature had a horse-like head with a spider-shaped body, black and orange stripes all across, and was immensely large. Gustav floated down and flew back into the hole he had blasted through the creature's body. The frozen digestive area was defrosting already, so Gustav easily broke through and retrieved the cross that was almost digested earlier. He got back out of the body and swam away from this area. After getting quite a distance away from where the disturbance had happened earlier, Gustav dropped down to the ocean floor once more and stabbed the cross into it. He wasted no time in retrieving the ruby into his grasp, sensing that it might have attracted the presence of the last creature. It doesn't even emit that much energy. Why would it attract such a creature when it would get no benefit from consuming it? Gustav wondered as he activated God Eyes once more. God Eyes has been activated. Within the ruby, he could see some weird mechanics. It was no ordinary ruby, as some unknown runic had been crafted into it. Gustav studied the internals of the ruby for a while, and then proceeded to tap different parts of its outer structure. Triune light shot out of the ruby, forming a square-shaped holographic projection. Gustav scrutinized the projection that looked like a map. Is that here underwater? Gustav said internally as he stared at the map. A few red dots could be seen, and by the far edge a part of the island was highlighted, which was cut out since the dots on the map did not extend to that area. These dots. The one closest to me is at the location I just left, Gustav noticed. The next dot was several hundred kilometers northeast. Gustav already had suspicions of what these dots depicted, but he had to confirm. I should have tried taking the bloodline of the aqua tarantula, but it's so big, I don't know where to make contact with to activate acquisition. Gustav realized it might help since he was underwater, but there was no time for that right now. Boom! Current blasted underwater as waves spread forth from Gustav's figure while he dove forward at full speed. His body was moving and wriggling like a fish as he swam forward. With every wave of his arms, his body would be pushed several hundred feet forward. Of course, he wasn't as fast underwater as he was on land, but nevertheless, he was still quite quick. After many minutes, Gustav arrived at the next dot, and his suspicions were confirmed. There was a pile of rubble, as well as multiple fragments of a building scattered across the place. So it turns out everywhere marked on the map is an area where underwater buildings have been demolished. Gustav said internally as he looked around. He had bumped into several of them back when he started this underwater venture, but the last one was where he found the ruby. Gustav suspected it was some kind of checkpoint, but then he inspected the entire place and didn't find anything that could assist with the emblem investigation. What was the purpose of building them in the first place, just to leave them demolished? Gustav still wondered. At this point, he wanted to head back to the main Vertigan residence to question them about this since it would soon be daybreak. However, Gustav decided to check the rest of the dots on the map first. There are still about 7 of them. That would also complete half my underwater scan across the circumference of the island, Gustav thought. He would still take many more hours before he was done circling the entire island underwater. Gustav wasted no time in resuming his scan as he activated God Eyes once more and kept swimming forward. Are you sure? Atop what looked like a tower, 2 figures could be spotted almost like they were in the clouds. One was a male who sat cross-legged on the platform, while the other was a female who stood right behind him with her head hung low in respect. Yes, master. It was reported just now that the signal went off. The lady responded with a respectful tone. I created a TikTok account Timmic_. I made a few interesting videos concerning TBS, so make sure to check them out and follow for more interesting updates in the future. Chapter 886. Daybreak arrives. Yes, master. It was reported just now that the signal went off. The lady responded with a respectful tone. What area, and is there any footage? The man who had a backward C-shaped scar on his forehead voiced out. There was a short footage before communication was interrupted by an aqua mixed breed. There is a high chance the intruder is no longer alive. The lady voiced out while taking a small circular device out. She moved to his front and placed it on the ground right before him. Truant, a slightly blurry holographic projection shot out next, displaying underwater footage. In this footage, a human figure could be seen floating in front of a massive, adult-sized cross that was stabbed into the ocean floor. The human figure underwater could not be seen clearly, and from the angle of the footage, it seemed like it was being recorded from the ocean floor as well. Then all of a sudden the sand on the ocean floor, as well as all the debris from the demolished building structure in the area, blasted across the place as a disturbance occurred. The only thing they were able to point out before the footage disappeared was everything was being pulled into a large hole by a suction force. The intruder definitely got swallowed up. But we don't want anyone snooping around the site areas. The man spoke after the holographic footage came to an end. What are your orders, master? She asked respectfully. I'm not taking any chances. Do a clean sweep of the perimeter across the site areas to confirm that no life form is snooping around, he voiced out with a solemn tone. Noted, master, she answered while standing uprightly. Go with Fackle and use the tridiver, he added while closing his eyes once more. As you wish, master, she said before bowing slightly and walking towards the ledge of the tower top. She jumped off the massive sky-high building without batting an eyelid. There's nothing here too, Gustav said internally as he once more scanned the premises underwater where rubble could be seen scattered around. Just one more location left. Gustav stared at the map which displayed he was currently at the second to the last location marked on the map. He estimated that with his current speed in the water he would get there in about an hour. That stupid quest just had to be issued, eh? Gustav nagged internally. He had gadgets and pieces of technological equipment that could help him move faster underwater, but because of the quest, he couldn't make use of any of them. He had swum to the surface half an hour back to inhale oxygen, since he had been underwater for over 8 hours already. Right now it was daybreak, but still quite early in the morning. He already knew this objective would take some time, so the daybreaking didn't mean he would stop. It just meant he had to be more subtle and properly hide his presence since activity all around the island would increase more due to time. Gustav began heading in the direction of the next marked location in the next instant. Occasionally he would zigzag underwater to dodge some obstacles protruding from the ocean floor or anything else floating across the place. Since it was now daytime, the ocean wasn't so dark as it was in the middle of the night. Rays from the sunlight penetrated the water, making the bottom of the ocean look a bit clearer. Not wanting to waste energy unnecessarily, Gustav deactivated God Eyes and continued swimming towards the next location while spreading out his perception. 30 minutes later, the ocean floor around here, covering over a 200 kilometers radius, has been leveled. A feminine voice was heard through a communication frequency as two figures floated above what looked like a dark hole underwater. It's thousands of feet lower than it's supposed to be. A masculine voice was heard next as these two figures in dark robes kept staring down at the hole. Scan for signs of life. The one with the feminine figure voiced out as she stretched out her left hand, which was blazing with a blue glow. Thrin, rays of light shot out from her arm into the hole and spread across the entire place. Beep, beep, beep. Despite being underwear, low beeping sounds could be heard for a few moments before stopping. The lady, who had some weird blue lines on her face, showed a look of shock before speaking. No signs of life, but there is a corpse of a sea mixed breed down there. She paused for a brief instant as the light she shot out retracted. Pa. She snapped her fingers, and a small holographic projection appeared in front of both of them. It's a level 82 aqua tarantula mixed breed. She voiced out as the projection displayed an exact image of how the corpse of the creature was laying at the bottom of the hole. Level 82? The footage makes sense now. They like to burrow deep into the ocean floor and tend to attack their prey by swallowing them whole from underneath when the prey gets too close to the ocean floor, the other masculine figure voiced out. That's not the issue right now. Look here, she said while flipping the holographic projection to display a part of the creature. See the large hole on this side of its body? It was killed by someone, and I guess it's the same person who was caught on the footage, she stated with a look of suspicion. That's true, Phil. Which means they might still be out there. His eyes widened slightly as he voiced out while staring at the holographic projection. And they're not weak either. We have to go after them right now, she said while swimming upwards with speed. H&M. He nodded and swam upwards as well. They both got into a bungalow-sized underwater vehicle that was floating upwards all this time before zooming off into the distance. Almost there. What's with the weird drop in temperature? Gustav said internally as he kept swimming forward. Chapter 887. The masked location almost there. What's with the weird drop in temperature? Gustav said internally as he kept swimming forward. The further he went, the lower the temperature underwater dropped. Surprisingly, despite the temperature reducing exponentially, this area underwater remained solid and didn't turn to frost. Gustav kept traveling towards the next point, and at this time he activated God Eyes after sensing structures up ahead. The terrain of the ocean floor had slanted in a diagonal format and was also further descending lower up ahead. Gustav's eyes peered further and noticed there was an underwater rock towards the southwest area, up ahead several hundred feet tall. At the top of this underwater rock that spans across several kilometers, a large circular-shaped structure with cracks and a missing roofing area could be seen atop it. This exact location was the same marker on the map. Gustav had finally arrived at the last location. The temperature had dropped to a very low point, and some areas on the ocean floor were whitish. The circular-shaped building that looked quite desolate also had whitish coloring at different spots. Gustav slowed his swimming down at this point and moved in the direction of the underwater rock. He swam up and landed directly by the side of the building. Gustav looked around, and he could see that within the building there were a lot of smashed pieces of tools, technology, and all sorts of things. It was difficult to tell exactly what it was one was looking at when they stared at the pile of rubble, but this place was practically similar to the other marked locations Gustav had been checking out earlier. The only difference was the building looked way more intact than the rest. Nevertheless, Gustav moved into the building and looked around while holding onto a pale yellow card with hints of red. The circular building was larger than the size of a stadium, so he made sure to move to every nook and cranny of the area while holding the card. However, even with that, there was no response from the card, which meant this was yet another location where he had to rule out the presence of the emblem. Gustav brought out the ruby once more and stared at the map. Truly, this was the last location blinking on the map, and even the map ended at this particular location. Gustav spotted something while checking the map once more. It had been guised so perfectly that he didn't see it beforehand, but due to still having God Eyes activated while he stared at the map, he noticed this. There's another location underneath this one? Gustav thought with a look of astonishment. The last location on the map, blinking with red light like the others, had a very small red light, just like it blinking right underneath it. They were in sync, blinking at the same rate, but God's eyes had caught the one difference they had that would be missed by anyone who stared at it. One would definitely think it was just a single light blinking, whereas it was two. Gustav swam upwards a bit and looked down with God's eyes still activated. His sight peered into the ground atop this rock area, but he was unable to see any underground passageway at the top. Everything was solid for over 100 feet. Gustav was a bit confused about the situation, so he decided to swim further upwards to get a wider range of view using God's eyes. He finally spotted what seemed to be an entrance at the foot of the rock on the east side. There was a kind of pathway within the foot of the rock that extended further down into the ocean floor. Gustav swam towards the foot of the mountain and moved towards the area he had spotted the passageway within the rock. Landing right in front, one couldn't see any passageway or any signs that beyond the rocky covering there was a passageway. Gustav guessed there was most likely a kind of activation that was needed for the rocky covering to open up and reveal the doorway beyond. He inspected the outer rocky covering for some time, and even with God's eyes, he couldn't figure out how it was supposed to be bypassed. Gustav brought out the ruby once more and moved it closer to the rock to see if there'd be any reaction, but there was none whatsoever. Looks like I have no other option but to smash through it, Gustav thought after trying different approaches. He would rather not do this because he didn't know what to expect if he used a violent approach. Although he hadn't spotted any traps of the sort with God's eyes, from what he had noticed so far, God's eyes was limited underwater to a certain extent. Gustav's arms enlarged as he tightened his fist and slightly raised his right hand. He was ready to destroy the outer covering of the rock when his perception picked up on something. A fast-moving underwater vehicle headed in this direction from the south. Gustav's perception had picked up on it a few miles before it got to his precise location, but it had already closed in the distance by more than half in barely a few moments. He wanted to move towards a corner and hide, but the moment he turned around to stare in the direction of the underwater vehicle, a blue beam was already headed for his location. Flyei Gruklul waves thrashed about the place as Gustav moved as quickly as he could towards the side. Boom! A part of the beam slammed into his right side, sending him spiraling along with the harsh current generated from the blast. Bam! Gustav hit the rock behind, causing the entirety of it to tremble for a bit. He groaned a little as he tried stabilizing himself. By the time he managed to stabilize himself, the bungalow-sized underwater vehicle had already arrived in front of the rock. Another beam was shot out, and this time, Gustav placed his hand on the rock, causing icicle-like rocks to shot out of it intensely and form a barrier in front of him. Chapter 888. Battling the Two Unknown Assailants. Boom. Even though parts of the barrier made from the Iro silk crumbled, Gustav was still in one piece as he moved out of the way. Two figures clad in dark robes dropped out of the underwater vehicle an instant later and stared at Gustav with cautious looks. One was a lady with a buxom figure and blue scale-like lines on her face. Her hair was ocean blue as well and reached down to the back of her thighs. The other was a man with a bald head, completely tattooed with blue color. A part of the tattoo from his bald head extended to his left eye, which looked like the tail of an unknown creature. Who are these two? Gustav wondered while floating several 10 feet ahead of them. He couldn't outrightly question their purpose here since he was holding his breath and couldn't speak underwater. I recognize him. It's the kid the MBO sent, the man voiced out with a cautious tone. He is no ordinary officer. Fackle, we have to inform Master first. Phil voiced out as she prepared to activate a communication device, but then, Fackle had already lunged forward. We have to end him as soon as possible before he draws any others here. Fackle shouted out as he arrived in front of Gustav, while a ball of corroding liquid appeared in his palm. Gustav raised his right hand and grabbed hold of Fackle's wrist before his attack could connect and thrust out his left palm at the same instant. Palm strike has been activated. Bam! His palm strike was blocked by Phil, who had suddenly arrived by Fackle's side. Phil raised her left hand after blocking Gustav's attack with her right and chopped down. Bam! Waves of current blasted across the place as Gustav was sent tumbling down. What was that? Underwater teleportation? Gustav was surprised he was barely able to react to Phil's speed. Gustav didn't even have time to analyze Phil's speed before both of them swam downwards, arriving in front of him once more. Gustav could already tell that both of them were faster than him underwater, especially Phil, so he had to increase his reaction speed to their attacks. Both Fackel's hands generated balls of corroding liquid that affected the entire place as he attacked Gustav from up front. Gustav could feel the intensity of the corrosion despite not making contact. Since it was underwater, it affected the whole vicinity and caused part of the rock behind them to crumble down in some areas. Bam! Bam! Gustav managed to block both of Fackel's arms swinging towards him and held him in place before turning him around. Bam! Phil, who had appeared behind Gustav earlier, already swung her fist forward, which ended up colliding with Fackel's back. The intensity behind the punch sent both Fackel and Gustav rolling backwards with the current created. Arg! Fackel groaned in pain after the fist was unleashed on his back. Phil gritted her teeth after making the mistake and suddenly turned into bubbles. This time Gustav saw it happen. Bubbling sounds were heard from behind as she reappeared right behind him. Gustav was able to grab hold of her outstretched hand before it could make contact with him and went on to engage her in close-quarter combat. Bam! 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 Heavy currents were generated across the place as both of them clashed repeatedly, throwing fists and punches at each other. Phil would dissipate into bubbles and appear on Gustav's blind spots before sending out attacks. Fortunately, Gustav's perception made it so he was able to pick up on her reappearance instantly. However, he would be slow in countering sometimes due to his speed underwater being greatly reduced. This resulted in him taking damage occasionally. At this point, Gustav was cursing at the fact that he didn't have a transformation that would boost his strength underwater. He was skeptical about using the ultimate combination form at the moment because he saw that as one of his last resort power boosts. Gustav knew the location of the fight wasn't favorable to him, especially since these two seemed to have buffed up movement speed underwater. Fackel, who had stabilized himself after some time, finally came back to join the fight, and things became even harder for Gustav. He decided to use the demonic bunny transformation at this point, turning into a dark, muscular-looking 12-feet-tall bunny with dark horns. Kairar opening his mouth, sonic waves blasted out of them, forcing both opponents back in the direction they came charging from. Gustav didn't stop and sent out sonic waves, repeatedly causing Phil to slam into the vehicle they came in. Boom! An explosion happened underwater as she blasted through it with her body and kept spiraling further away with the waves. Phil! Fackel yelled out as he turned to face the direction she was being pushed in. Gustav appeared behind him with his fist hurling forward. Bang! Fackel's back caved in as he was sent spiraling forward. Swai! Gustav swam forward with intense speed and joined both hands together before sending a conjoined punch down towards Fackel's head. Bang! Waves blasted across the place as Fackel's body fell to the bottom of the ocean and blasted further into the ocean floor. Thwaish at the top of the ocean, high waves of water had been blasted upwards due to the fight happening underneath. Gustav swam downwards as fast as he could to land another blow, but then the water all around him began to bubble intensely. Unlike the other times where he could tell where Shed reappear from, Gustav was unable to tell this time, because even his perception was being tricked. The entire vicinity was bubbling across a radius of more than 100 feet. All of a sudden Gustav found his body being wrapped by massive beastly arms with scales and claws. Before he could react to that, he had been dragged towards the ocean floor. Boom! Debris and sand blasted across the place as a powerful collision was made with the ocean floor. Chapter 889. Displacing the ocean waves. Boom! Debris and sand spread across the place as a powerful collision was made with the ocean floor. Gustav felt claws on his shoulder and back pinning him to the ocean floor that had just been leveled with his body. Above him was a massive blue-scaled draconic figure with ram horns. The eyes of this draconic figure radiated with an ocean-colored glow as it stomped Gustav further into the ocean floor. Its wings spread across the place and it flapped repeatedly, causing an intense water spout. Gustav's body got pulled into the water sprout, and he found himself spinning across the place with it. Bam! A massive claw appeared out of nowhere and slashed against his chest, sending him further into the water sprout that was teeming with sand and all sorts of things that could be found at the bottom of the ocean. Phil would occasionally appear and reappear attacking Gustav. As Gustav was being shoved across the place due to the force of the intense water sprout, he was barely able to defend himself from the attacks of Phil. Phil controlled the water sprout as she willed, totally putting Gustav in a state of unbalance. All he could see was dirt and floating objects clouding his view and slamming into him repeatedly as he got tossed around intensely. A normal person would have been ripped to shreds at this point, but Gustav was still whole. Although the same couldn't be said about his clothes. Fackel, who was initially beaten down by Gustav, had recovered now. He transformed into a draconic figure, as well with bluish scales mixed with brown. He didn't look as majestic as Phil, nor was he as large, but then his eyes seemed to be gleaming with violet light. "I'll finish him with this," he voiced out as he positioned himself several feet from the spiraling water sprout. It was as if they were both unaffected by the water sprout despite the fact that it was pulling everything within a radius of 3,000 feet towards it. The intensity within was something Gustav, however, he would have found a way to escape from it by now if he wasn't getting attacked occasionally by Phil, who was making it immensely difficult for him to find stability. Gustav's perception was nearly useless in this situation along with God's eyes. Fackel's mouth gathered a spiraling blue ball in front, causing the entire vicinity to start bubbling from corrosion. Gustav could feel his skin start to boil, although the attack was still being formed. Although his senses were being affected from getting knocked around, he could still roughly pick up on the fact that one of them was about to use a powerful attack that would most likely cause a lot of damage. "I have to do something," Gustav thought as he decided on the best course of action, while also raising his arms to block another attack from Phil. Bang! He got tossed further into the water sprout once more as long gashes appeared on his arms, drawing out a bit of blood. This attack is powerful enough to burn down an entire mountain in seconds. "He won't survive," Fackel said internally, as the blue ball causing the water to sizzle became thrice as large as a boulder. "Die," he voiced out as he released the attack. Fuhom, sshhzzhhzz. The water sizzled and bubbled even more as the ball shot forward with speed towards the direction of the water sprout. At this same time, Phil had appeared right in front of Gustav to give him a quick hit before disappearing so Fackel's attack could do the rest. However, this time, she had no idea that Gustav was already anticipating her attack. The moment her claws appeared in front of him, Gustav reached out and grabbed hold of them. Power boost has been activated. Gustav's strength increased by a notch as he held on to the arms of the draconic figure. "Huh," Phil voiced out with a shocked tone. He managed to trap Phil in place, and despite her struggling to get him to release her, she was unable to do so for a few moments. Gravitational displacement has been activated. Just when the attack was about to hit, energy discharge has been activated. Boom. The activation of gravitational displacement, along with energy discharge, sent forth a reddish blast from Gustav's figure that pushed all the water around him aside. Boom. From above it could be seen that a large hole had been blasted within a part of the ocean and waves of water were being pushed aside. The far bottom of the ocean could be seen as reddish energy at the ocean floor, violently pushing aside bodies of water, causing immense waves to spread across a radius of more than 11 miles. Gustav, who was at the bottom of the ocean still holding on to Phil, landed on the ocean ground as the entire space was now void of water. Walls of waves surrounded them on all sides, but due to the intense push of the energy blast along with the gravitational displacement, the space would be clear of the water for some time. "Advantage," Gustav mumbled as he stared at the dumbstruck Phil. Ultimate combination form has been activated. Gustav's skin turned silvery as he enlarged in size and grew a pair of radiant-looking horns glowing with majestic light. "How did you?" Phil was about to speak when she sensed the powerful surge of energy from Gustav. She tried disappearing, but not being submerged in a body of water, she was unable to do so, and her strength had decreased drastically. Fackel, who had been knocked several hundred feet away from the blast, found himself on wet ground. What happened? He slowly picked his battered self up as blood oozed out from several of his orifices. His eyes widened as he looked around and saw the waves of water suspended in place around them like walls. What the hell? He couldn't help but voice out, but at the same moment, he sensed an immense power surge from up ahead. He looked forward and could see the glowing silvery being that Gustav had become with Phil in his hold, unable to free herself. Chapter 890. Battling the two unknown assailants. Boom. Even though parts of the barrier made from the Iro silk crumbled, Gustav was still in one piece as he moved out of the way. Two figures clad in dark robes dropped out of the underwater vehicle an instant later and stared at Gustav with cautious looks. One was a lady with a buxom figure and blue scale-like lines on her face. Her hair was ocean blue as well and reached down to the back of her thighs. The other was a man with a bald head, completely tattooed with blue color. A part of the tattoo from his bald head extended to his left eye, which looked like the tail of an unknown creature. Who are these two? Gustav wondered while floating several 10 feet ahead of them. He couldn't outrightly question their purpose here since he was holding his breath and couldn't speak underwater. I recognize him. It's the kid the MBO sent, the man voiced out with a cautious tone. He is no ordinary officer. Fackle, we have to inform Master first. Phil voiced out as she prepared to activate a communication device, but then, Fackle had already lunged forward. We have to end him as soon as possible before he draws any others here. Fackle shouted out as he arrived in front of Gustav, while a ball of corroding liquid appeared in his palm. Gustav raised his right hand and grabbed hold of Fake's wrist before his attack could connect and thrust out his left palm at the same instant. Palm strike has been activated, Barn. His palm strike was blocked by Fit, who had suddenly arrived by Fackle's side. Phil raised her left hand after blocking Gustav's attack with her right and chopped down. Barn. Waves of current blasted across the place as Gustav was sent tumbling down. What was that? Underwater teleportation? Gustav was surprised he was barely able to react to Phil's speed. Gustav didn't even have time to analyze Phil's speed before both of them swam downwards, arriving in front of him once more. Gustav could already tell that both of them were faster than him underwater, especially Phil, so he had to increase his reaction speed to their attacks. Both Fackle's hands generated balls of corroding liquid that affected the entire place as he attacked Gustav from up front. Gustav could feel the intensity of the corrosion despite not making contact. Since it was underwater, it affected the whole vicinity and caused part of the rock behind them to crumble down in some areas. Barn. Bam. Gustav managed to block both of Fackle's arms swinging towards him and held him in place before turning him around. Barn. Phil, who had appeared behind Gustav earlier, already swung her fist forward, which ended up colliding with Fackle's back. The intensity behind the punch sent both Fackle and Gustav rolling backwards with the current created. Arg! Fackle groaned in pain after the fist was unleashed on his back. Phil gritted her teeth after making the mistake and suddenly turned into bubbles. This time Gustav saw it happen. Bubbling sounds were heard from behind as she reappeared right behind him. Gustav was able to grab hold of her outstretched hand before it could make contact with him and went on to engage her in close-quarter combat. Barn. Bam. Bam. Heavy currents were generated across the place as both of them clashed repeatedly, throwing fists and punches at each other. Phil would dissipate into bubbles and appear on Gustav's blind spots before sending out attacks. Fortunately, Gustav's perception made it so he was able to pick up on her reappearance instantly. However, he would be slow in countering sometimes due to his speed underwater being greatly reduced. This resulted in him taking damage occasionally. At this point, Gustav was cursing at the fact that he didn't have a transformation that would boost his strength underwater. He was skeptical about using the ultimate combination form at the moment because he saw that as one of his last resort power boosts. Gustav knew the location of the fight wasn't favorable to him, especially since these two seemed to have buffed up movement speed underwater. Fackle, who had stabilized himself after some time, finally came back to join the fight, and things became even harder for Gusty. He decided to use the demonic bunny transformation at this point, turning into a dark, muscular-looking 12 feet tall bunny with dark horns. Kairar, opening his mouth, sonic waves blasted out of them, forcing both opponents back in the direction they came charging from. Gustav didn't stop and sent out sonic waves, repeatedly causing Phil to slam into the vehicle they came in. Boom! An explosion happened underwater as she blasted through it with her body and kept spiraling further away with the waves. Phil! Fackel yelled out as he turned to face the direction she was being pushed in. Gustav appeared behind him with his fist hurling forward. Bang! Fackel's back caved in as he was sent spiraling forward. SWW Gustav swam forward with intense speed and joined both hands together before sending a conjoined punch down towards Fackel's head. Bang! Waves blasted across the place as Fackel's body fell to the bottom of the ocean and blasted further into the ocean floor. Thwaish at the top of the ocean, high waves of water had been blasted upwards due to the fight happening underneath. Gustav swam downwards as fast as he could to land another blow, but then the water all around him began to bubble intensely. Unlike the other times where he could tell where Shed reappear from, Gustav was unable to tell this time, because even his perception was being tricked. The entire vicinity was bubbling across a radius of more than 100 feet. All of a sudden Gustav found his body being wrapped by massive beastly arms with scales and claws. Before he could react to that, he had been dragged towards the ocean floor. Boom! Debris and sand blasted across the place as a powerful collision was made with the ocean floor. Chapter 891. Finding the wanted item. Extraction complete. Host has acquired Great Aqua Draconic Bloodline. Gustav stood to his feet after the acquisition was completed. The whole process only lasted for about 30 seconds. It was not so slow that Gustav didn't have to worry about taking too much time to acquire a bloodline, but he couldn't be bothered to take Fackel's. Gustav hurried towards the rocky area up ahead after completing this, which was still several hundred feet away. He would have loved to destroy the corpses so there would not be any lingering evidence of battle, but there was no time for that as well. The bloody corpses were bound to attract sea creatures, so he wasn't too worried since they would most likely be eaten up before anyone got here. Gustav arrived in front of the east area of the rocky last marked location on the map. Despite their battle that wreaked a lot of havoc on the surroundings, this rock was still intact. The battle had ended quite a distance from here, but at the very least there would be some damage here since there was a lot of destruction, but the rock didn't even look like it took any damage. The building atop it took more damage and got even more demolished. This made Gustav understand that destroying the outer covering of the rock to reveal the passageway would have been a much more difficult task than he anticipated. Ting, ting. The circular item in his grasp began to beep the moment Gustav stretched it forward towards the rocky wall. Z's rumbling sound echoed across the place as the area of the ocean floor Gustav was standing on began to vibrate. A circular outline appeared around Gustav on the ocean floor. Grrrhhh, a huge part of the rocky wall shifted inside and then upwards as the floor beneath Gustav's feet began to move forward after the opening into this dark part was revealed. It moved Gustav into this dark pathway that extended downwards as the opening behind closed up. Streams of water had moved in as well, but there seemed to be some filtering holes built into this pathway which directed the current elsewhere. The water cleared up, and now Gustav was being moved down this dark space atop the initial ocean floor, which was something like an elevator. The pathway was built in a diagonal format, so the platform descending was pushing down across the slanted ground. God Eyes has been activated. Gustav activated God Eyes as he descended through this dark pathway. It extended so deep downwards it took some time before Gustav's sight got to the bottom of the descending pathway. It looked like there was a hallway at the bottom that led towards a space up ahead. I should really thank those two for coming after me, Gustav thought as he descended downwards. Getting into this place would have been an issue if the battle between Phil and Fackel didn't happen. They practically brought the key to him and also added a new bloodline, so Gustav had gained in more ways than one. Retracting his sight, Gustav figured that there were still at least 10,000 feet more to descend before getting to the bottom. His knees lowered as he crouched a bit before leaping off the descending platform. Fly-eyed Gustav fell across the air speedily, descending past several thousand feet in nearly an instant. Bam! He landed somewhere up ahead and leapt forward once more. Fly-eye, His body traveled across the air and downwards speedily before landing somewhere up ahead again. Bam! Only a few hundred feet were left at this point, so he just kept sliding down with his feet. Gustav arrived at the bottom in a moment and began moving forward. Red lights began to switch on as he walked down the dark hallway. What appeared in his line of sight up ahead was a spacious area, half the size of a football field. He looked around and spotted multiple technology types of equipment lined up at a side. Computers and other items that looked like they were no longer in use were scattered across the place. A large table was placed in the south area and some doors at different corners which probably led to different places. On the east side of the wall, a glowing drawing of what looked like a two-headed dragon with one head being red and the other being blue could be seen. Unlike the drawing on the emblem of the Vertigons, this one looked rather scary and HD, a cross of skulls wrapped around its body. However, all of these didn't really pique Gustav's interest. Beep, 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 beep. A beeping sound was coming from the yellowish card in his storage device. Gustav didn't even bother bringing it out. He looked up as his eyes locked on the transparent tub-like storage hanging from the ceiling area. What could be seen within was a flat diamond-shaped object. It was gold and white with sharp-looking edges. In the middle was the carving of a three-headed draconic-like creature. All in all, this item looked quite domineering as well as luxurious and exuded mystical energy that seemed like it was being restricted by the tub it was kept in. This was the item that was being sought after all this time. The Vertigan emblem. It was underwater all along. It all makes sense now, Gustav said internally as he moved towards the middle of the space. Thwoom! He leapt upward with his arm arched downwards and threw an uppercut at the tub. Boom! The tub blasted to pieces the moment collision was made, and Gustav spread his hands to catch the emblem the moment it got freed. However, the moment Gustav was about to make contact with it, Thria, a blast of energy burst forth from it that slammed into Gustav and sent him flying across the place. Bam! He slammed into the wall as the emblem fell to the floor and got embedded in the tiles after the heavy impact. Chapter 892. Powerful presence. It rejected my presence? Gustav thought as he pulled himself up after sliding down the wall. He was unaffected by the blast of energy. He felt it wasn't trying to hurt him, since it just pushed him away like a warning, instead of actively sending out a more powerful energy. Gustav could sense a bit of sentience now that the tub was destroyed and the emblem was free. He began to move towards the spot where the emblem was embedded in. The closer he got, the more it glowed up. It was as if it was warning Gustav not to come any closer, or it would blast out the same energy as before. I am here to return you to your rightful owner, Gustav voiced out as he closed in on it. However, his words did not seem to be getting through as the glow turned even fiercer the closer he got to it. Gustav voiced out the words again, but it was still the same thing. He had two thoughts in his mind at this point. Either head overpower the energy blast of the emblem and take it by force, or head try using mental manipulation to pass his message across to it. He couldn't waste any more time staying here as he didn't know what he was up against yet. He felt the first option was not very viable since it has been said that the emblem is very powerful. Who knew if it would send out a blast that would obliterate the entire surroundings if he tried to take it by force? He had no idea the technique they used to steal it in the first place, so he had to work his way around the situation himself. Mental manipulation has been activated. Gustav instantly connected his mind to that of the small mental signal the sentience of the emblem was emitting. Your rightful owner is my friend. I'm here to take you back. Gustav sent this message mentally and proceeded to attach an image from his mind where he and Stark were discussing. Although mental manipulation was a faulty bloodline that made it incapable of taking over someone's mind, he could still do this much. The glow emitting from the emblem began to die down after Gustav performed this action. He slowly began to walk towards it after feeling like it had acknowledged that he wasn't hostile. Their life signals disappeared? A masculine tone filled with wariness and suspiciousness could be heard. Yes, master. We are unable to communicate with both Phil and Fackle in the last 30 minutes. The person standing in front of who had spoken earlier responded. Both figures stood atop a massive tower that extended into the skies above. Fog could be seen around them as well as clouds. The one who was being referred to as Master was about 57 in height and had a backward C-shaped scar on his forehead. He was clad in a blue and red robe, while the one reporting to him was clad in a black robe like Fackle and Phil. What of the Tridiver? Can the location be pinpointed? The Master asked. It cannot. We have lost communication to that as well, the other one answered while shaking his head. However, Master, we do have readings of the location where its signal disappeared, the man voiced once more. Where? The Master asked. The man in the black robe hesitated a little before answering. Master, it's at one of the base locations. The last one in particular, he answered. That's... The Master's eyes widened as he heard that. That location is off-limits and must not be discovered by anyone. What are we waiting for? Gather everyone, we're going there right now. He yelled out as he moved towards the ledge of the rooftop. Moss. Master, are you going there as well? He asked with a look of shock. Gather everyone and meet me there. He voiced with a strong tone as his eyes glowed up. His left eye radiated with a blue glow, while his right radiated with a red glow. He leapt forward while transforming into a massive draconic figure. Flyei, he ascended into the clouds and phased forward with immense speed before arriving above the ocean in the blink of an eye. It would seem their previous location wasn't too far from one of the edges of the island. Fuwu, a tornado formed in the sky and began descending toward the ocean with immense speed. Twiush, streams of water blasted upward as the tornado, which was the Master in disguise, pierced into the ocean and descended to the bottom instantly. Finally, it's time to leave, Gustav said internally as he swam towards the top of the ocean. He arrived at the top after a few seconds and began swimming towards the edge, which was a couple of kilometers away since he had gotten a good distance away from shore. It was still morning, but the time was getting close to noon at this point. Gustav swam as quickly as he could, not wanting to be in this area anymore, but all of a sudden there was a massive disturbance in the water. Waves began to gather from the far west, and for reasons unknown, they kept rising. It rose to a height of several hundred feet in a couple of seconds, and it seemed to be rushing towards Gustav's area with speed. Hover has been activated. His body ascended out of the water as he flew speedily towards the shore. Flyei, he was able to get to the shore in nearly an instant, but the waves didn't stop accumulating and rose to a height of more than 1,000 feet, while spreading across a width of several hundred miles. It had risen so high that even the sunlight had been bloated out, making the entire vicinity turn dark. Within the scary body of waves, Gustav could sense energy from a beta-ranked mixed blood. The waves that were spreading had gone beyond the shore and were now aiming to swallow Gustav up. Zing! Chapter 893. I'm starting to doubt your sexuality. The waves that were spreading had gone beyond the shore and were aiming to swallow Gustav up. At this point, Gustav already had his hand on his left wrist. A bluish bracelet that wasn't visible initially appeared on it. Gustav was still flying away as quickly as he could, and wings had already sprouted out of his back. However, he knew he'd be unable to outrun this wave that was chasing after him, as they had surrounded him from all sides. You will perish here. A loud voice was heard from all sides. At the last moment when he was about to be swallowed up, Gustav activated God Eyes. Gotcha, he said internally as a bright blue light engulfed his entire figure. Zing. He disappeared in the next instant as the ocean of waves connected and crashed atop a forest with multiple mountains. The entire place was instantly turned into a large river as the currents ripped hundreds of trees from the ground and caused some of the mountains to crumble. The entire vicinity trembled immensely, and it looked like no living thing in that area would survive such a downpour. All through no face was spotted, and neither was the body of the presence responsible for this, so it looked like a tsunami was responsible. However, this was way crazier than a tsunami and had a much more devastating impact on the surroundings. The presence disappeared a few moments later after sensing that it had missed its prey. Zing. Gustav appeared in his room within the Vertigon's main residence. Splash. A jet of water appeared with him, which ended up dousing the room a bit. That was close. I would have to use Yarki if he had caught me, Gustav said internally as he wiped his water-soaked face. His hair had stuck to some parts of his face, and looked very slippery due to wetness. Gustav was currently in black, tattered shorts. All his clothes had been ripped off during battle earlier. He was glad he put a marker in this room with his dimensional bracelet. If not, he'd have teleported to a location where everyone would get to feast their eyes on his half-naked body. I should have worn the special combat suit underneath, Gustav thought, and decided he would do that next time. He didn't expect the last 12 hours to go the way it went. Everything now made sense. At least I got the price, Gustav muttered as a head-sized C-shaped item appeared in his hand. It was the emblem of the Vertigan family. The moment it appeared from his storage device, it sent forth a weird discharge of energy that spread across the entire household. Hold on, I'll take you to him after wearing some clothes, Gustav voiced out and placed the emblem on his bed. He moved to put on some new clothes. Meanwhile, all across the household in different spots, the emblem. That's the emblem. The emblem has been found? The family members recognized the energy signature of the emblem and were instantly able to tell that it had been retrieved. Everyone began moving towards the precise spot where the signal was sent from. Bang! Bang! Stark! Open the goddamn door. In one area of the house, a beautiful dark-skinned lady banged on the first door in a corridor. I am coming. A response was heard from within with a low sigh. Click. The door opened up slightly a few moments later, and Stark pushed his head forward from the small space he opened. Didn't you sense it? The emblem has been retrieved. The dark-skinned lady who had similar facial features to Stark voiced out. I was gonna come out later, Lyra. Stark responded with a weary tone. You're so irresponsible. Lyra, who was one of Stark's 3 big sisters, voiced out. Yeah. So who retrieved it? He proceeded to ask. Officer Crimson, she stated. His weary eyes suddenly gleamed with a look of interest as he heard that. Let's go, he said while walking out of his room in his pajamas and closing the door behind him. Lyra had a look of awe and confusion mixed as she stared at Stark's back while he walked down the hallway. I guess all I need to do to get him interested in something now is to call Gustav's name, she said with a tone of annoyance. I can hear you, big sis, Stark voiced out from up ahead. I'm starting to doubt your sexuality, Lyra voiced out as she followed behind him. Minutes later, all the adult main family members were gathered in one of the living rooms. Here, Gustav voiced out as he passed the emblem to Madame Lillian. Thank you, Officer Crimson. You have saved the main family from so much negativity that would have occurred if this wasn't found, she said with an appreciative tone. I'm just doing my job, Gustav answered with a straight face. How did you find it? I mean, where? Uncle Bela was the first to ask the question that was on the minds of so many of them. Well, it wasn't too difficult, but I'll keep that information to myself until I find the rest of the culprits, Gustav voiced out with an unbothered tone. You will keep the information to yourself? How is? Uncle Bela's face hardened as he voiced out, but before he could complete his sentence, Madame Lillian interrupted. Relax, Bela. Officer Crimson has mentioned earlier that he will only reveal information to me and Stark. He is still doing his job and doesn't want it to be jeopardized, she voiced out. Yes, relax, Uncle. I'm sure Gustav will fill us in. Stark finally spoke as well. Uncle Bela and some of the other main family members still had unsatisfied looks on their faces, but they decided to back down. Their annoyance was justifiable since no one liked to be treated as a suspect. There was still a brief discussion between all of the family members, and Gustav mentioned that he was onto the culprits already. Chapter 894. Cult? He mentioned he couldn't get any of them yet cause the circumstances were unfortunate, and he had to end their lives. He told them the investigation wasn't over until he found everyone that had a hand in the disappearance of the emblem. Gustav followed Madame Lillian and Stark to the vault room where they kept all sorts of important artifacts and expensive items that depicted their massive wealth. Are you sure it's going to be safe here? Gustav asked as he watched the guards place the emblem back into the C-shaped platform it was initially stored in. The guards will be doubled and eyes will be on the emblem 24/7. Besides, we're all here and no one is going on any vacation till the ceremony, so it's way safer than it was before, Madame Lillian answered. I will personally keep watch over it till the ceremony, Uncle Bela voiced from the side. They'll see who has the guts to try and get in here to steal it, he added with a strong tone of confidence. Why not just have the ceremony right now so Stark can merge with the emblem? Gustav asked with a contemplative look. Because some procedures need to be put in place first, which will take about 2 days, Madame Lillian answered. All right, Gustav muttered with a look of understanding. Stark stood up ahead, staring at the emblem after it got placed back in the storage platform. Gustav, you're still looking for the culprits, right? Stark asked, and Gustav nodded softly. I can help, Stark said while turning around. How so? Gustav questioned. I can retrace the movement of the emblem and pinpoint the areas it had been in within the last month. Now that I have made contact with it once again, it's possible to do that, Stark explained. No, you can't be out there during this period. You have to stay in here till the ceremony begins, one of the uncles voiced out from the side. He's right. You can't be out there right now, Madame Lillian agreed. Come on, Mum. Uncles, I can take care of myself, Stark voiced out like an aggrieved child that was always being placed under lock and key by parental figures. It's dangerous. We don't even know what we're dealing with yet since Officer Crimson here has refused to tell us anything. Uncle Bela also voiced his disagreement. He's strong enough to protect me. Besides, we won't be going after them alone. Won't some of the guards be following us? Stark stated. I could use all the help I can get. What we're dealing with is no small opposition, Gustav finally spoke. The vicinity turned quiet as Gustav voiced out. From the tone he used, it seemed like some serious force was responsible for this. You see, Mum? I should help as much as I can so we can finally put everything to an end and Officer Crimson can complete his assignment here, Stark voiced out. Fine, but he'll only give the go-ahead after listening to Gustav's narration on the train of events that happened when he was retrieving the emblem, Madame Lillian answered. They proceeded to move to a secluded space within the household which looked like a library. A technological device that prevented voice leaks or any form of spying tools was activated while they discussed. So you're saying you saw a sign or an emblem that looked like the opposite of how the dragon on our family emblem looks? Madame Lillian asked. Not opposite, just more sinister looking. The emblem has 3 heads, but this has just 2, with one being red and the other being blue, Gustav explained. It's definitely a cult logo. I thought those were cleared out in the family long ago, Stark said with a tone of confusion as he turned to face his mum. It would seem they were not cleared out completely. This one, in particular, doesn't seem so familiar, Madame Lillian said with a look of contemplation. Is it like an organization that has something against the main family? Gustav asked as he seemed to have caught on to some hints from their response. Yes, but they were all wiped out in the past. We never knew there were any new ones opposing us from the shadows. They mostly want to change things and have the intention of making the family more public than private. I guess they were trying to harness the power of the emblem, Madame Lillian voiced out her thoughts at length. I see. I guess that makes sense. There is no doubt that they are Vertigons as well, but they are dissatisfied with the state of things, Gustav mumbled. He had already narrated his experience to them in the last 12 hours and how much he had to look to find the place. They explained to Gustav that those demolished structures he found underwater were initially for a project the Vertigons were working on. The handling of the project was given to a family branch head, who according to Madame Lillian died a few years back. The project didn't go so well, and the structures they built underwater were mostly destroyed by some unfathomable strong abnormal torrents. They appeared at certain periods. Besides that, the structures underwater would be attacked by massive underwater mixed breeds, and this part of the world had so many of them. If it was anywhere else they would have succeeded, but because it was around the island they were having difficulty setting it up. The project was abandoned for a while along with the demolished structures, and then a few years after abandonment, the family branch head who was in charge of it at the time died. This person would have been the first Gustav would question after finding the emblem in one of the supposed structures they were building, but since he was dead, that was not possible. The question now was, who had access to all the plans and setup for the project since all of these had happened after his death? If they could find this person, they would figure out the mastermind. Chapter 895. Ruling out the prime suspects. The question now was, who had access to all the plans and setup for the project since all of these had happened after his death? If they could find this person, they would figure out the mastermind. Gustav's next guess was whoever became the next head, but one couldn't just accuse a person like that without evidence. Someone came after me while I was trying to get away with the emblem, Gustav stated. Stark and his mother both turned to face Gustav with an attentive look after hearing that. A beta-ranked mixed blood, Gustav added. Madame Lillian had a look of astonishment after hearing that. There was not a lot of them on the island. Only about 5 mixed bloods here had managed to achieve the beta rank, and 2 of them came from the main household. The other 3 were different branches' heads. The alpha-ranked mixed bloods that protected the main family were usually hidden in the shadows, so they weren't known like the others. That's dangerous. We might have to bring Viltrue out of the shadows to keep Stark safe as he embarks on the mission with you, Madame Lillian decided after hearing that there was such a powerful mixed blood amongst the opposition. I did mention that I need all the help I can get. Gustav hinted that this was one of the reasons he mentioned that. The tsunami that hit the southwest part of the island, that was his doing, Gustav added. Stark had a look of confusion since he hadn't heard about it, but Madame Lillian, being the one in charge of the city, was well aware of the happening. It had been broadcasted on the island media outlet, and was said to be an unusual tsunami since it wiped out the forestry in that area along with some mountains. They had blamed it on the weather, but now that Gustav had confirmed it was done by one of their oppositions, things that didn't add up initially were starting to make sense. Did you see his face? Stark asked. He wasn't in human form, but I did see something that can help, Gustav responded as he recalled what he saw before he got teleported away. That brief instant between the period where the dimensional bracelet was activated and when Gustav was teleported away, he had activated life signs tracking. He peered at the enemy life sign and was able to recall it. Now he could track him down using this. The only reason why Stark would be of help was that Gustav knew they had multiple other members due to the ones he already battled earlier. It would make it easier to find the others besides this person who Gustav suspected might be the main power behind the opposition. He already told them about his battle underwater initially, so they knew there were others to find. I should gather a troop of our finest forces so they can raid the locations together with you too, Madame Lillian voiced out. I only need the help of your Alpha rank member when going after the Beta-ranked mixed blood. He has to be amongst the leaders, Gustav voiced out. Madame Lillian agreed and stated that when Gustav found the location, he should communicate with her. They went on to speak for a few more minutes, making plans, and Gustav revealing how the operation would begin by nightfall when he was done with all his preparations and investigation. Gustav later moved back to his room around noon. Gustav still had footage displaying the 12 he had been watching the whole time within his room. He began to play back everything that had happened within every tape in the last 16 hours that he was indisposed. Gustav was hoping to spot something that could link to this case in one way or the other. He sped up the playback and everything was moving extremely fast, but with God's eyes it was easy for him to watch everything at fast speed and not miss a single second despite the speed. In 3 hours, everything that happened in the last 16 hours with all the suspects he was keeping his eyes on had been displayed completely. Gustav had watched every single one of them all the same time and was able to create slots in his mind where he was able to draft important happenings from each footage. With me retrieving the emblem, there would definitely be some kind of reaction or emergency meeting that would have taken place. If any of them visit any strange place that isn't usually a part of their schedule or have any weird communication, they are definitely a part of this. This was what Gustav thought before he started watching the playback of the footage. Now that he was done, 2 people out of the 12 were deemed even more suspicious while the other 10 hadn't engaged in any suspicious activities. At this point, it was okay to give the 10 a benefit of the doubt that they were actually innocent while Gustav would be able to focus on the other 2. Coterio and Tridisilham. I just need some concrete evidence before making any move, Gustav mumbled as he stared at the 2 projections side by side. At this point where he ruled out the other 10 not being suspicious, he decided to highlight both footage displaying the 2 main suspects and place them side by side. At the moment, family branch head Coterio sat atop a mountain region, channeling his bloodline. Gustav could see and hear things from the surroundings due to his last operation where he shot every one of them. The other holographic screen displayed Tridisil, a white-haired, middle-aged-looking man who was currently in a luxurious-looking office dressed in a green suit. Currently, nothing was happening in both locations, and what Gustav had witnessed initially that made them prime suspects was their trip to the area where he got attacked by the presence that was trying to swallow him up with the tsunami. Of course, anyone could be curious and go there to check it out themselves since it was now all over the news, but these two, in particular, had no reason to be there. Chapter 896. Confirmation of involvement. The family branch heads dealt with their tasks given by the main family, and each one was too busy to visit every scene where there is a disaster unless it actually concerns their tasks. At most, they'd send someone and not go there in person, but not only did they visit the scene, but both of them also met up for a brief moment, then proceeded to scour the entire region and even the ocean area beyond the island. After doing that, they gave each other weird signals and left the location. After Gustav witnessed both of them acting so suspiciously while the other 10 continued with their businesses in different locations, he decided they were prime suspects. Even if he didn't find any concrete evidence in watching them today, he would still make sure he proved they were linked to the cult. After hours of watching till it was late in the evening, Tridacil was about to leave his office when someone knocked on the door. At this time, Coterio was still sitting atop the mountain and hadn't moved an inch, so nothing was interesting going on his side. Gustav focused on Tridacil's screen. A purplish-haired young lady walked into the office after Tridacil allowed access. She looked very pretty with an oval-shaped face, a red top, and a black mini-skirt. She was also clad in black pop socks that reached her knee area. The moment this busty young lady came up to him after entering his office, he grabbed her by the hair and turned her around. Bam! He pinned her face to the office table instantly and began groping her thighs up to her buttocks. In barely a few minutes, a heated scene was playing out between the purple-haired lady and Tridacil. His hand was wrapped around her neck with her face pinned to the office table. Her back was arched with her, but perked out while he stood behind her and thrust back and forth repeatedly. Loud moans filled the office along with flesh-slapping sounds. Gustav wished he could block his eyes and his ears, but he had to keep watching. After some time, Tridacil let out a loud groan as his body quivered for a few seconds before he finally moved away from behind the lady. He pulled his fly back up and spanked the lattice ass, which was bare with whitish liquid dripping from her nether regions. She made a low moan before pulling her black panties up and her skirt down as well. "Here, you go, sir," she voiced out amidst her breathlessness as she passed a small round token to Tridacil. He received it from her and moved towards his seat while the lady moved out of the office. That wasn't his wife. "I guess women are correct when they say men are the scum of the earth," Gustav said internally as he shook his head. However, at this same moment, Gustav's eyes spotted something. The token Tridacil had just received glowed a red and blue light. In the next moment, a projection shot out of it that displayed a two-headed red and blue dragon for a little while. The red and blue dragon transformed into the projection of a time and location before disappearing. Gustav instantly recognized that sign to be the same one he found in the space underwater where the emblem was placed. At this point, there was no longer a doubt that Tridacil was linked to the cult. On the screen displaying Coterio, a similar scene played out on the mountain, but without the sex. A male in a black robe had appeared on the mountain top and passed Coterio a similar token to what Tridacil had just received. Right now the skies were already dark, so it was getting closer and closer to the time Gustav wanted to embark on the night objective according to his plan. Between this night to the next day, he had to make sure he caught every single person involved in the incident of the missing emblem since the ceremony would be held the day after. Calm, calm, calm. At this minute, Gustav heard a knock on his door. Unlike the previous times when he ignored, he finally opened the door this time. A lady in a maid outfit greeted him upon contact, pushing a large trolley of food items. "Hold on." Gustav was about to stop her when Stark came in as well. "You haven't taken anything today, have you?" "I sent her here 3 times, Gustav," Stark voiced out as he gestured at the maid to unload the food items. "I'm okay and I'm busy," Gustav said while the food was being unloaded on the table by the side. "Doesn't mean you should go without food for over a day," Stark responded with an unrelenting tone. "It's almost time for the mission and I need to bring you and Madame Lillian up to speed on the current development of things," Gustav said while his eyes dropped. La 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 la. "I can't hear you out until you eat something," Stark voiced out sarcastically. Gustav nearly face-bombed before moving towards the table. Different dishes were placed before him ranging from seafood to even exotic forest meat. Water, wine and a few other drinks as well. It was practically a banquet since the amount of food here was enough to feed a family of 20. Not that Gustav was complaining since he would usually go days without eating, only to eat a mountain-sized amount of food later. He proceeded to start eating after Stark had proven to be unrelenting. While eating, he decided to brief Stark. I have gotten 2 culprits in league with the cult from the branches, Gustav revealed. They are both family branch heads, he added. Oh, their names? Stark didn't seem too surprised as he asked. It was almost like this was to be expected. Tridacil and Coterio, Gustav added. Those 2. Stark had a slight look of astonishment as he mumbled. Although he had expected this, it would seem he was still surprised about the identity of the culprits. Chapter 897. Set out for the night raid. Although he had expected this, it would seem he was still surprised about the identity of the culprits. Gustav also understood that these were the branch heads of the 2nd and 3rd highest ranked branches in the entire Vertigan family. They were expected to stand by the main family the most instead of sabotaging them behind their backs. A thought that jumped to Gustav's mind was how this would be resolved after he had apprehended all the culprits. How would the main family handle this? Gustav threw that to the back of his mind in the next moment. That wasn't any of his business. His only job was to find and apprehend them. Are you ready to become the family head? Gustav asked Stark. There was no response for a good period and Gustav turned to the side to stare at Stark. Well, no, Stark responded as a melancholic aura surrounded him. But you seem quite eager to help me catch the culprits who were responsible for delaying a ceremony you are not interested in, Gustav said before gulping down a cup of wine. What can I say? It's the right thing to do. Despite not wanting to become the family head, yet, it doesn't mean I would beam with joy if the emblem was stolen, since it could have caused a lot of problems for the family. If they had figured out how to harness the power, a lot of people's lives would have been jeopardized, Stark explained. I will make sure something like this never happens again, even if I have to take on the role of the family head this early, Stark added. Looks like a hard choice, either your freedom or the endangerment of the family, Gustav muttered. Stark might be distant from his family and didn't like spending a lot of time with them, but he really loved them regardless. He also wouldn't want to betray the last promise he gave his father before his demise. He had mentioned he would protect the family in his absence. What kind of son would want to dishonor his late father's name? Since they have chosen this path, they will bear the consequences, Stark said with a solemn tone. Now that's a leader, all right, Gustav said internally as he noted Stark's demeanor. All right, get ready, Gustav said as he stood to his feet and moved to the bathroom to clean up. Stark stood to his feet and moved to the side of the room. He could see footage displaying the 2 family branch heads heading somewhere. Are we going where they're going? Stark asked. We are not, Gustav responded as he walked out of the bathroom. I already know where they're headed, but I am 100% certain that won't be all of them. There are over 20,000 Vertigons after all. Maybe just a meeting for the heads, Gustav added. Does that mean the Betrank mixed blood is also going to be there? Stark asked. Most likely. We can leave that to your alpha-ranked guard and the troops your mother will be gathering, Gustav answered. While we will be catching the other small fries scattered across the island, so long as you retrace the steps of emblem movement, we should be able to clock in on some of them, so it will be a double operation, Gustav explained. Oh, so Viltru won't be following the both of us then? Stark voiced out with a contemplative look. He'll be dealing with the other Betranked mixed blood, so no, Gustav responded. All right, let's do it, Stark stated with a decisive tone. We need to inform your mum first of the current development, Gustav said as he moved towards the door. Stark followed after him, and they headed straight down the stairs to the living room. Julie was sitting on one of the sofas with a few underage kids who Gustav suspected to be main family members as well. They were watching a televised anime program on the massive holographic projection. Where's Mom? Stark questioned. The second study, Julie responded with a slightly suspicious look. All right, Stark responded and turned towards the south while Gustav followed after him. Hey, Officer Crimson, she greeted while waving. Gustav turned to the side and nodded at her before he resumed following Stark. Minutes later, they were in a massive study, discussing with Madame Lillian. It only makes sense the main powers of the cult will be there tonight, Gustav voiced out. So I should send the troops to the location you mentioned? She asked. Yes, make sure they get there 20 minutes after the meeting has begun. I and Stark will be busy gathering the others so we can take them down in one fell swoop, Gustav said in confirmation. Madame Lillian had a contemplative look for a while before speaking. Does that mean you two don't need any troops to follow you? She asked. We just need them to be on ground and ready to take action when we are unable to handle things by ourselves, Gustav voiced out. He couldn't let them follow him, and Stark mostly because he wouldn't want to use too many abilities in front of strangers. However, Gustav wanted emergency troops to be on standby just in case of necessity. All right, let's get ready. Madame Lillian seemed to have understood everything as she voiced out in response. She proceeded to move out of the study with them as the operation would be beginning in an hour. Time went by pretty fast, and almost an hour had gone by since the discussion with Madame Lillian. Within a massive space, just in front of a hangar, troops of over 300 people had gathered. They were all dressed in whitish robe-like outfits with the emblem of a three-headed dragon on their backs. Their powerful lineage bloodline energies were being channeled as they stood there, causing pressure to radiate across the surroundings. All of them wore looks of seriousness as they lined up in a battle format. In front of them was Madame Lillian and a few of the main family members. Gustav was yet to arrive on the scene with Stark, as well as one more powerful figure needed for the operation to begin. Chapter 898. I'm coming with you. Gustav was yet to arrive on the scene with Stark, as well as one more powerful figure needed for the operation to begin. In a few more moments, a powerful aura spread across the entire place as a figure arrived on scene. He was also dressed in the same whitish robe-like outfits as the rest, but unlike them, he had golden patterns sewing around the emblem. Viltru, finally you're here, Madame Lillian voiced out as the man approached from the north. He had one eye shut and whitish hair like most of the Vertigons with a golden patch at the top. He looked like he was no older than 28 to 30 years of age, but everyone knew well not to underestimate the age of such powerful figures, as they could look like teenagers and be hundreds of years old. At your service, madam, he voiced out as he arrived in front of her and bowed slightly. Madame Lillian nodded for him to stand at ease, and he moved to stand by her right-hand side. Meanwhile, Uncle Bila was on her left. Where's the kid? Viltru asked with his eyes squinting. He has yet to. Just when Uncle Bila was about to respond, two figures fell from the air and landed right in front of the troops. They were Gustav and Stark. The instant Gustav landed in front of them, he spotted the man standing by the right side of Madame Lillian. Without any form of words or communication, he was instantly able to tell that this must be one of the Alfrankt Viltru who guarded the main household. Of course, someone of his caliber would have been able to stop the emblem from getting stolen, but he was their guard, so he had followed them on the trip as well. What do you have for us, kid? Viltru asked as he and Gustav made eye contact. Gustav moved toward him and handed out a device. Viltru received it from him and tapped on it. Zing, it shot out a holographic image of the exact location and how to get there. Gustav went on to pass it to several of the troops as well. He knew very well that the formation they had taken was one where they would be split into different squads that will attack from different angles. They were well-trained warriors. It's time, Madame Salora, who had welcomed Gustav on his first day of arriving here, voiced out. You all know what to do. Storm the location given to you and apprehend the cultists. Use lethal force if it is required, Madame Lillian stated. Yes, family head. They yelled out in understanding as they began transforming. Powerful energy spread across the place as hundreds of draconic figures could be seen in the next instant with similar and different sizes, as well as colors that depicted their lineage bloodline speciality. Fwyi, 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 the sound of multiple wings flapping reverberated across the surroundings as the troops lifted off into the air and flew towards the northeast area of the night sky. Gustav's face molded, turning dark with reddish cracks as he slowly transformed into the Flame's Death Ace. This time he made a full transformation as he wanted to adopt the full speed of the mixed breed. The others in the surroundings could feel the immense rise in temperature from the creature after Gustav's transformation and guessed it was a high-leveled mixed-breed transformation. "Let's go," Gustav voiced out as he turned his massive head to the side. Stark had also transformed as well, taking the two-headed draconic figure that caused all the other Vertigons in the vicinity to stare in reverence. Gustav was currently the size of an entire bungalow building with his transformation, which was as big as the other troops who had just flown off, but Stark was twice as large. Flyei, both of them spread their wings and flew off into the western sky. "Be safe," Madame Lillian uttered under her breath as they flew off. She and Madame Salora with a few troops were the only ones left standing here. Reaching a particular height in the sky, Stark paused his flight. Gustav also did the same, floating in the air beside him. "They'll start scanning now," Stark voiced out with a tone that boomed across the entire vicinity like thunder. Gustav nodded slightly as he watched Stark's 6 glowing eyes turn yellow and red. Different locations began to appear in Stark's point of view as it slowly changed from one place to another. Gustav waited for several minutes before the glows in Stark's eyes began to dim. "Got them. There are 4 places in total," Stark voiced out. "List them out," Gustav voiced out as he activated his communication device. Stark began to give names to the 4 locations he just sourced out. One was behind one of the colleges on the island. From this, they already knew who was responsible for that, since that area was left in charge of a particular Vertigan. Another was in a large hospital. The third was in a base location where technological weapons were being kept, and the final place was in a remote location on the island very close to the western edge. "The troops will not be enough," Stark stated. "That's all right. Tell me the location with the most powerful mixed bloods. Let the troops handle the other places. They'll take care of that," Gustav voiced out with a confident tone. "The Shiina Plains. There's a tall tower there. I sense powerful mixed bloods dwelling there," Stark said with a slightly wary tone. "Good. I'm heading there now. You go back to the main residence," Gustav said as he prepared to fly off. "No, I'm coming with you," Stark said while turning to face the same direction Gustav was about to head in. "I can't deal with the enemies while having to protect you at the same time. Head back, it's safer," Gustav voiced his disagreement. "I can take care of myself," Stark voiced out before bolting forward across the dark sky. "If you want me to return, you'll have to catch me." His loud voice boomed across the vicinity as he flew away. Flyei. Chapter 899. Intense destructive battles. "If you want me to return, you'll have to catch me." His loud voice boomed across the vicinity as he flew away. Flyei. Gustav's eyes narrowed as he gave chase, flying across the air as swiftly. Stark was flying at such a speed that caused loud cracking sounds in the air. Every intense flap sounded like rolling thunder. Gustav tried as much as possible to catch up, but it was proving to be an impossible task. By the time Stark began to slow down, they had already arrived in the vicinity of the location they were headed for. An outburst of icy-colored flame blasted forth from Stark's figure as he landed right in front of a massive tower-like building. Boom! It spread across the place with intensity, blasting the gate as well as the fences barricading the vicinity apart. A few yells were heard as the security guarding the surroundings were knocked out and injured by the blast. Stark transformed back into his human look and began walking towards the entrance of the tower-like building. Gustav landed a few moments after and called out to Stark. "I told you to head back," Gustav said as he walked towards Stark and grabbed him by the arm. "Come on, we're already here. Wouldn't it be more dangerous to send me back by myself from this distance?" Stark stated with a logical tone. "You." Before Gustav could complete his sentence, a silver blast burst forth from the 5th floor towards their direction on the ground. Gustav pushed Stark to the side and swung his palm forward. Boom! Collision was made as Gustav's palm slapped the blast away, deflecting it towards the side. "Handle the enemies from the lower floor upwards. They'll handle things from the middle floor," Gustav voiced out as he leapt upwards. "If you need help, use the communication channel to contact me." Gustav's voice faded into the distance as he scaled a height of over 1,000 feet in nearly an instant. He figured since he couldn't send Stark back, he might as well make good use of him over here. This structure had over 700 floors, but Gustav already analyzed the entire structure the moment he arrived here. He already knew a lot of floors were unoccupied, and there were significantly weaker opponents on the lower floors, which was why he told Stark to handle from the lowest floor up to the middle. He wasn't even currently heading towards the middle, as the middle floor was currently unoccupied. In the next instant, bang! Gustav's figure blasted through the wall of the 506th floor. The instant he arrived in what seemed like a hallway, he could already see multiple figures in black robes making their way towards an elevator up ahead. Who are? The first person to turn around and notice Gustav was unable to complete his sentence before he received a kick to the gut. Bang! His body flew across the hallway with intensity as he slammed into multiple of his other comrades. Sprint has been activated. Swoosh! Gustav charged forward with intensity after the successful surprise attack. The four who were initially headed for the elevator area were either laying on the floor or had their backs kissing the walls of the hallway. They were unable to react in time before his figure arrived before them. Bang! 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 The sounds of multiple heavy collisions rang out as Gustav threw out physical attacks repeatedly. His fist slammed into the head of one of the enemies in black robes and sent him crashing through the wall. Gustav wasted no time in dashing towards another one and sending out multiple fists that knocked them out in barely a few moments. After some seconds, he was done dealing with the black robes' enemies on this floor and leapt upwards. Bang! Gustav wasn't even taking the elevator. He just kept leaping through the ceilings to the higher floors as he felt this was faster. The moment he arrived on the next floor where many of the opposition were clustered together, another battle broke out. Far beneath, Stark was also holding his own against them. If you know who I am, surrender peacefully. This doesn't have to end in destruction, Stark voiced out as he walked slowly towards a group of 6 in dark robes. You made a huge mistake coming here. You will never become family head. One of them yelled out as all 6 charged at Stark while transforming. Bang! A loud sound similar to a blast rang out as this part of the building vibrated intensely. Debris and dust spread across the place as a massive hole appeared on the wall by the right. Boom! A massive 2-headed draconic figure phased out of the hole and flew a few feet upwards with another draconic figure in his grasp. Bang! 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 The 2-headed draconic figure slammed the other one into the wall repeatedly as it flew upwards with it. Loud, painful shrieks were heard as it flew a few floors upwards and blasted through the wall of the 13th floor. Stark transformed back into his human form after dealing with the group and shook his head. At least I tried to reason with them, Stark said while shrugging his shoulders before walking forward. Behind him were 2 human figures that had passed out from his attack. Stark continued onwards after this as the sound of collisions and explosions rang out within this tower. In another location over 70 miles off the east coast of the island, a similar-looking tower to the one Phil was deployed from with her partner. Multiple draconic figures could be seen flying around it as the vicinity had turned into a battlefield. Boom! Boom! Bang! Multiple thunderous sounds of explosions and collisions rang out as different types of attacks were being hurled across the air. Massive bungalow-sized fireballs, lightning bolts, whirlwinds, explosive blasts, and all sorts wreaked havoc in the middle of the ocean where this tower was situated. Boom! A powerful outburst of greenish energy suddenly blasted forth across the place as the top floor of the tower got blown into smithereens. Chapter 900. The Vertigan troops versus the Satori. A powerful outburst of greenish energy suddenly blasted forth across the place as the top floor of the tower got blown into smithereens. The instant this happened, everyone in the vicinity was sent flying hundreds of feet backwards as the force of the energy swept across the environment. Boom! 3 figures blasted forth from the area where the surge of energy originated from. They were engaged in intense battle as they swerved from place to place across the air, exchanging fearsome attacks. 2 out of these 3 figures were dressed in orange and black robes, and they seemed to be battling again the third figure who was dressed in a white outfit. Boom, bang, bang. With every collision, ripples of powerful energy swept across the place, causing thunderous explosions and making the ocean waves rise. These two battling the man in white robes were barely holding on. Despite being very powerful, they could not hold their ground against the man in white robes, who just kept foiling their attacks like it was nothing. The men in orange and black robes dived forward across the air as they gathered immense energy to attack the man in white robes again. The one in orange shot out a massive rocky-like tail with diamond spikes which had the tip glowing with fierce as it stabbed towards the man in white. The other dived forward as his right arm transformed into a massive greenish, scaled beast with glowing red claws which were as large as a truck. Both attacks swung forward with immense speed, spreading ripples across the air and causing waves of destruction to be sent forth across the vicinity. At this point, the other figures fighting were protecting themselves from the residue energy of these two attacks that hadn't even collided with the targeted figure yet. Boom! Another massive explosion rang out as ripples of destructive multicolored waves blasted across a 300 miles radius. The yells of some of the figures in the vicinity were drowned by the loud blast, as everyone was sent hurling backwards for several hundred feet, acquiring all sorts of injuries despite not being the one targeted by the attack. Sir Viltru, is he? The troops in white robes who had managed to conjure up a barrier for themselves stared in the direction of the attack with shocked looks. Viltru was battling two betranked mixed bloods who happened to be family branch heads. Even with the barrier they had conjured up, some of them still got minor injuries from the residue energy of the attack, even when it wasn't directed at them. They wonder how Viltru, who was in the middle of both attacks, would fare. As the debris in the air slowly cleared and the visibility of the environment became better, everyone stared in the direction of Viltru and the other two. Their eyes widened in disbelief as they spotted the three figures floating in the air up ahead. In the middle was Viltru, who had both his arms held out sideways as he looked forward with a nonchalant expression. In his left grasp was a rocky-looking tail with diamond spikes, and in his right grasp were massive beast-like claws the size of a truck. He had stopped both attacks, and there was not a single scratch on his body. Neither were his clothes affected. The two opponents, who were Tridacil and Coterio, both had looks of astonishment mixed with wariness on their faces as they stared at Viltru, who looked unwavering. Although they had not fully transformed into draconic figures, which meant the attack wasn't at full strength, they were still surprised he was completely unaffected by their attack, considering how powerful it was. Despite only being one rank below Viltru, both their combined strengths couldn't match up to him. "You have no hopes of standing against me. Surrender and end this foolishness." Tridacil, Coterio, Viltru voiced out with a tone of warning. Both of their faces squeezed up as they responded, "Never." In that same instant, they transformed fully into draconic figures as they prepared to engage Viltru again. Meanwhile, at the other similar-looking tower on the western edge of the island, Gustav and Stark were still going against the cult members here. Close to 20 minutes had elapsed since the battle had begun, and Gustav had managed to take down over 30 of them in this building. He was currently on the 700th floor, and a feminine figure in dark robes was in the clutches of his right hand. "Tell me, who exactly are you guys?" Gustav asked as he tightened his grip around her neck. "Cuckoo, Tichestio, we will not lose." Her voice kept breaking off as she answered. "The Satori?" Gustav voiced out with a look of confusion. "Kikik." She suddenly started laughing, causing Gustav's eyes to narrow in suspicion. He subconsciously loosened the tightness of his grip on her neck, feeling like she had something to say. "Thank you for bringing the unworthy son here. You have helped us make things easier." The instant she finished voicing this out, an outburst of powerful energy suddenly blasted forth from the top floor. Gustav's eyes widened slightly as he turned around and looked up. "That's the energy of a beta-ranked mixed blood," he muttered with a look of surprise and wariness. "He will die at the hands of the master." The woman voiced out as bloody glowing claws protruded from her fingers, and she swiped at Gustav's neck. "Grab." Gustav stopped the attack by grabbing her right hand before turning to stare at her. Bang! He slammed her through the wall and turned around before dashing forward and slamming her head through the other side of the wall. The wall crumbled and Gustav held her out thousands of feet above the air with her legs dangling in the wind. He wanted to drop her from this height and go deal with the current situation as a sense of urgency welled up from within. However, Gustav recalled he was dealing with dragons here, so he would just be setting her free, and there was no time to steal her bloodline, so he did something else. Flesh warping has been activated. Chapter 901. Its too late flesh-wriggling sounds rang out as her eyes widened in confusion after feeling weird energy run through her body. Boom. Her body blasted into pieces in the next instant with blood and internal organs flying everywhere. Phoom. Gustav proceeded to jump out of the hole he had created after slamming the woman's body into the wall earlier. Stark. He yelled out as his body descended with speed after he spotted a massive draconic about 700 feet below, flying downwards as well. That's not Stark. Gustav came to this realization as he activated God Eyes. Begone, weakling. The draconic figure suddenly voiced out as it turned around to gaze at Gustav from below. To whoosh. Boom. Boom. At the other location where the Vertigo troops engaged the cult members, explosions and powerful collisions still rang across the place. Viltru had moved his battle with both family branch leaders further across the ocean so the others would not be affected by the residue energy of their attacks. He knew just how destructive their battle was to the surroundings. If the fight continued there, it would affect the island as well. Just one of them was strong enough to level the entire island, and there were 3 of them. From the looks of things, it would not take much longer before the Vertigan troops took care of the cult members here. However, for reasons unknown, they kept battling despite knowing that the odds were against them. On Viltra's side, he had put both family heads in a state where they knew they had no chance against him, yet they kept fighting. Bam, bam, bam. Tridacil and Coterio had fully transformed into draconic figures at this point and were hurling out one attack after the other toward Viltru. Viltru took their attacks head-on despite still being in human form. He didn't bother transforming since he was able to handle them despite not being at full strength. Viltru bolted forward amid a combined attack of a red laser beam shooting out of Coterio's mouth, while Tridacil shot out a silver bolt of lightning carrying immense destructive power. Viltru made a circular motion with his right hand as he charged forward across the air, causing both attacks to get redirected the moment they arrived before him. Boom. The attack slammed into a sea mountain in the distance, blasting it to smithereens. Tush. Arriving in front of both of them once more, Viltru proceeded to grab them both and slammed their massive heads together. Both figures drifted away across the air after their heads got slammed together. He lunged forward and threw his fist out multiple times at both of them, causing them to be sent flying backwards once more. As he battered them with numerous physical attacks, more injuries appeared on their bodies. Why do you two keep resisting? You do not have the power to defeat me. Give up before I inflict permanent damage on you both, Viltru voiced out. He seemed to have been holding back all this time because they were family branch heads, and he wanted to leave them in good condition so they could be judged by the main Vertigan family. Even if we know we will lose, we have achieved our main objective here today, Coterio voiced out. By now your so-called next head should be in the hands of the master, Tridacil added. What master? Viltru suddenly felt a sense of foreboding after hearing that. Ha ha ha. Despite being injured, Coterio still let out a burst of maniacal laughter. Viltru's mind suddenly wandered back to Gustav's words in the hangar area before they left for this place. Thinking about this carefully now, Tridacil and Coterio were already known to everyone, so they never fitted into the description of this mixed blood, which begged the question, where is the mixed blood Gustav described? This was supposed to be a meeting of leaders as assumed by Gustav, but there were many cultist members in this location as well, so it looked like it was a regular meeting that was being held. However, even if this was a regular meeting, it didn't make sense that one of the leaders wasn't in attendance. Now, how have these two mentioned achieved their objectives despite losing the fight against him? And could the so-called master have captured Stark by now? He recalled Gustav was heading to different locations to round up other cultist members, and Stark followed. His eyes widened slightly at this point as he came to a realization. Where is he? He voiced out with a thunderous tone as his eyes turned yellowish with a black in the middle. It's too late. Even if we told you, you will never be able to arrive there in time no matter how fast you are, Tridacil said while smiling with an expression of delight. Two more eyes appeared above Viltrus' right and left brows as powerful energy blasted forth from his figure, causing every living thing within a 1,000-mile radius to shudder in fear and reverence. Both of them suddenly saw Viltru appear directly in their midst, and the next thing they knew, Ryop, two pairs of bloody wings could be seen in his grasp. They stared for an instant with shocked looks as they recognized the pair of wings to be theirs. Their bodies hadn't even registered the pain yet as they began to fall from the sky. Their wings were torn off so quickly and cleanly that they hadn't started bleeding out till they were about to collide with the ocean's surface. Viltru flung both wings away and floated above the ocean while spreading out his senses. A colorless veil of energy spread forth from his figure, traveling for miles and passing by the area where the Vertigan troops were battling against the cult members. At this point, they had already rounded them all up. His senses spread past that point, arriving at the island, and kept spreading further. This took many seconds as he actively searched for Stark and Gustav's location with his senses. Chapter 902. The Master's appearance is that Officer Crimson? He asked internally after spotting a silver figure with horns and a large muscular frame with ram horns. In this location, destruction had been wreaked on the environment. With his senses in a particular location, he wasted no time in retracting his senses as he began transforming. VRRRHRHHHH, he turned into a small mountain-sized draconic figure with 2 heads and 6 eyes like Stark. However, he had yellowish scales and a glowing yellow and black pair of wings with 4 horns. The instant he spread his wings, winds blasted across the surroundings. Fewwoom diving forward. A vacuum of space opened up, causing a streak of yellow line to tear through the sky and disappear in the next instant. Twayai, it only took a moment for him to close the distance between himself and Gustav on the other side of the island. However, as he arrived behind Gustav, he could see that damage has already been done to the surroundings, and he couldn't sense Stark here. Where is Stark? He asked with a disturbed look as he sensed lingering spatial energy, which meant spatial travel had just been used in this location. The tower-like building by the side was now half of what it was earlier. What was left had cracks all over and was on fire as well. The ground was flooded below. Gustav had injuries on his body from what Viltru could see as he floated in midair behind him. Officer Crimson, where is Stark? Viltru asked again as he placed his hand on Gustav's shoulder from behind. There was still no response from Gustav, and at this point, Viltru feared the worst may have happened. He had truly gotten here too late. Gustav slowly turned around in midair as he unfolded himself. He was initially in a state where he kind of wrapped himself up. Viltrus' eyes widened as he stared at Gustav unfolding himself. 15 minutes earlier, begone weakling. A thunderous voice was heard as the draconic figure several hundred feet beneath Gustav turned around to face him. What is he doing here? Gustav's eyes widened as he recognized this draconic figure to be the same as the one that nearly buried him with hurricanes after he acquired the emblem. Gustav hadn't even managed to rearrange his thoughts when a pillar of flames shot out of his mouth towards Gustav. This red and blue 2-headed draconic figure could manipulate water and fire from the looks of things. The flames hadn't even reached Gustav yet, and he could feel his body getting cooked already. Gravitational displacement has been activated. The gravitational force in the environment suddenly turned weird as the flames slowed down. Despite how powerful gravitational displacement was, having an effect on everything in the surroundings and making even the winds to flow in reverse, it was unable to substantially affect the powerful outburst of flames headed towards Gustav. Energy discharge has been activated. A reddish energy suddenly burst forth from Gustav's figure, pushing the flames to the surroundings. Boom! It was like an explosion went off as the thick condensed flames ended up spreading across the place and causing the massive 700-plus-story-tall building to almost get halved in an instant. The upper part crumbled and fell to the sides due to the flames. Despite having managed to stop it from hitting him, Gustav was still blasted backwards by the residual energy spreading across the vicinity. Screams of terror and pain were heard from within the building as it affected the cult members. I commend you for stopping that attack despite being an ordinary Echo rank mixed blood, but this is as far as you go. The draconic figure voiced out from both heads, causing his voice to travel far and wide. Gustav hadn't even managed to stabilize himself in midair, yet as he spread cooling energy around his body since it was currently smoking. Thank you for bringing the prize to me. The draconic figure voiced out as it continued flying downwards. Blast! An explosion rang out as the side of the 330th floor got blasted open. A two-headed, massive golden-scaled draconic figure flew out of there and collided with the master. Gustav, are you okay? Stark yelled out as he spotted Gustav far up in the sky. Run! Gustav yelled back. Despite being about 2,000 feet upwards, his voice boomed loudly across the vicinity. You are going nowhere, the master voiced out as he lunged at Stark. Disappear! Stark screamed out as both mouths of two heads opened up. Thuro, silver-colored energy with golden streams blasted out of his mouth, slamming into the master and pushing him backwards. The energy bound him in place and began to shrink him. I have to admit, you are talented, but you do not deserve to lead this family, the master voiced out as he ripped the silverish and golden-colored energy covering him apart in the same instant. Stark puked out blood after that act as his eyes widened. No one had ever been able to free themselves from his ability before. He had used it on others stronger than him so many times. It was an ultimate ability that would have a negative effect on him if it was cancelled. The master lunged forward once more and grabbed all of Stark's arms before biting a chunk out of the left side of his second head. The master had expected that attack to disconnect Stark's second head from his neck, but he had underestimated the toughness of Stark's scales. Stark screeched in pain as he managed to free two of his hands. He grabbed the master's head and stabbed his claws into both eyes, causing him to grimace in pain as well. Ha ha ha, this is nothing. You're only able to put up a little fight because of your nature, but this ends now, the master voiced out as he opened his mouth, gathering flames within. At this point, Gustav had activated Ultimate Combination and was flying downwards with insane speed. Chapter 903. Battling against the cult leader, a 4-feet-long katana with reddish electric arcs and destructive energy oozing from it could be seen in Gustav's grasp. Fwyi, he swung downwards powerfully, causing the space in the vicinity to twist and turn as crescent-shaped reddish energy was formed. The master sensed the disturbance at the same moment and pushed Stark away before turning upwards to counter the attack. Phew! It shot out a pillar of flames from its mouth, once more towards the destructive reddish arc, cutting towards him. Boom! A collision was made, and the reddish arc was stopped in midair for an instant. A smile appeared on the master's face, but in the next moment, his eyes widened as the arc suddenly cut through his pillar of flames and slashed through his right upper limb upon contact. Blood jetted out as the master seethed in pain and rage after getting injured, contrary to his expectation. You little... His voice trailed off in anger as heat began to circulate across the vicinity. Phew! The ocean, which was not too distant from their current location, began to rise and flow towards them. A massive tornado of flames appeared around the master, and then it spread across the vicinity, becoming twice as large as the tower. The wave from the ocean was headed for Gustav from behind, while the tornado of flames was approaching from the front. Gustav was healing very fast in this state, so he had already completely healed up the moment he attacked with the Jiko Hakai katana. Turned around to face the waves, Gustav pushed his hand forward, causing a gravitational barrier to be created. Boom! The waves of water crashed into the barrier, causing a loud sound of collision to ring out. With the height of the waves, it was capable of flooding the entire island if Gustav didn't stop it here. His hand trembled slightly as he held it in place, while he turned around to slash out once more at the tornado of flames. Fwyi! It tore right through the flames, and Gustav's arm also broke at the same instant. Fwyi! This time the master was able to dodge and dove upwards. He appeared right before Gustav and slashed out. Bang! An invisible protective energy that surrounded Gustav whenever he activated combination stopped the attack from connecting. Gustav proceeded to push the waves backwards and grab the hilt of the katana with both hands before slashing downwards. Boom! The reddish destructive arc exploded the moment it collided with the master's left shoulder, blasting both of them backwards. Gustav's right arm fell off his shoulder while the master also lost another arm. The master couldn't believe that he was getting injured by an echo-ranked mixed blood. However, Gustav took more damage this time, and the katana fell from the air after his arm got blasted to smithereens. The master also had the ability to regenerate, but at the moment Gustav's regeneration was faster. But even with that, the master still had 4 more limbs after losing 2, so he could keep battling in his current state. Gustav stared at the katana falling and stretched out his left hand. The katana stopped falling and floated in mid-air after getting wrapped by Gustav's gravitational manipulation. His right arm was growing back at this point. He pulled back his hand, causing the katana to start flying towards him, but before it could arrive. Slash! The master appeared in front of Gustav and landed a hit on him. Gustav got blasted further backwards across the air as 3 massive gashes appeared on his body. The protective energy surrounding him had been breached by the intense attack of this beta-ranked mixed blood. His skin was currently like diamond, extremely sturdy, but one slash from the master had torn him open like a hot knife going through butter. Gustav gritted his teeth in pain as he raised his arms to block another attack, while the Iroh silk grew out of his arms. Bang! 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 Gustav got blasted backwards repeatedly as the master kept attacking him without giving him any chance to retaliate. Gustav managed to dodge a hit with perception and finally sent out an attack he had been accumulating. Boom! Destructive ripples spread across the vicinity as Gustav's fist slammed into the master's gut. Unfortunately, this attack that would most likely have decimated a city was unable to break the master's skin. "It turns out you're nothing without that weapon of yours," the master voiced out as he grabbed Gustav's hands and sliced his arm off. Slash! Gustav lost his right arm once more and blood jetted out. Fuhum! A pillar of flames blasted out of the master's mouth, sending Gustav hurling further backwards as he tried to protect himself with just one arm. His arm grew back in the next moment, but the master was still rushing at him with multiple attacks, wanting Gustav to use up his energy, so he wouldn't be able to regenerate anymore. Far below, Stark looked upwards and could see the pinch Gustav was in. He was bleeding from his neck and currently couldn't transform. "Why do I have to be useless in crucial situations like this?" Stark gritted his teeth as he voiced out. They had not expected to meet a betranked mixed blood here. He looked up ahead and spotted a dark blade katana with reddish destructive arcs swimming around it. He recognized it to be the same weapon Gustav had used to injure the blue and red dragon. At this point, Gustav was being doused with both cold and hot attacks, just as the temperature of the environment was hot and cold at the same time. Stark rushed towards the weapon and pulled it out of the ground. Looking upwards at their height in the sky, he realized he would have to get up there. He recalled Gustav's sustained injuries when using this weapon, so a thought instantly appeared in his mind. He brought out something from his storage device and attached it to his neck. Truant. Chapter 904. Saving Stark, a mechanical metallic-looking covering of nanites began to spread to his arms. It made it look like he had silver-colored robotic arms after it had finished covering his upper body. Stark channeled his bloodline energy as much as he could and leapt upwards. "Hiya!" He screamed out as he grabbed the hilt of the katana with both his hands and raised it upwards as he ascended across the sky. All of Gustav's limbs were being held by the master as he pulled them in separate directions while hovering his left head over Gustav's face. Flames gathered as he prepared to burn Gustav's entire head off. Meanwhile, Stark was leaping towards them in arms while swinging out the katana. The master spotted him and made his other head turn around to face him as he prepared to attack Stark with water. Stark swung forward with force, but at the same time, the master was also about to attack. The probability of Stark's survival was very minimal due to the master's strength as well as backlash from using the katana this way. However, he gathered as much energy as he could into his arms. The air began to twist and turn as veins popped out on his neck and arm muscles. Gustav, whose arms were being spread apart, twisted his arms and grabbed the master's arm. Flesh warping has been activated. He managed to cause the master's arms to shrink a little, which gave him the chance to pull himself out of the master's grip. What was? Before the master could voice out his shock, Gustav grew out extra arms and grabbed both draconic heads. He pulled backwards with all his strength as he also activated size manipulation. He held the master in place as Stark slashed forward. ZZHHHHZZ. A massive cut that extended from his chest to his belly appeared on the master's body after the attack made contact. Both Stark's arms exploded along with the metallic covering, causing a fountain of blood to jet out from both shoulders while the master shrieked in pain as it flung Gustav away. Gustav flew forward and grabbed Stark before he could fall to his death. "Are you crazy?" Gustav voiced out as he held Stark in his arms. Care. I had to do it," Stark responded while coughing out blood. "We have to leave," Gustav said as he turned around. However, before he could start flying away, the entire vicinity suddenly turned dark. Vurii, and then it turned into a world of red and black. "Since I'm out of time, you're coming with me." A voice boomed out, and in the next instant Gustav could no longer find Stark in his grasp. Huh. Gustav turned around in the next instant and could see the master several thousand feet behind him with the armless Stark in his grasp. As Gustav dove forward, a massive, mountain-sized flame appeared in front and began hurling toward him. In the same instant, a purplish-looking portal appeared in front of the master, and he was about to head in with Stark. Power boost has been activated. Gravitational displacement has been activated. At that moment, Gustav activated everything he could just so he could move faster and stop the master from taking Stark away. There was no time at all. No matter how fast Gustav could move, he was dealing with a betranked mixed blood. Stark was already practically lost to him, since they were almost halfway through the portal at this point, while he was still thousands of feet away. The mountain-sized flames were right in front of him, and his skin was already getting cooked. Twice, Gustav pushed himself forward as fast as he could as his body turned transparent, while his eyes suddenly lit up with a cross-shaped reddish-pink glow. Through Una on, Yarki was activated at the same instant, causing a dark pinkish energy surge to spread across the vicinity. It covered the entire vicinity in an instant and was still spreading further. The power of Yarki made the master pause for a moment as Gustav's figure made a tear through space like what happened when he was sent to another planet as punishment by the system. Thwice, he appeared right before them and grabbed hold of Stark before kicking the master into the portal. At the same moment, the master regained control of his body. Fwii, the portal closed up in the next instant as Gustav used size manipulation to wrap his body around Stark due to Yarki being activated. Currently, everything in the vicinity was getting roasted because of Yarki's new effect, so Gustav proceeded to retract Yarki before it could turn the entire island into a high-temperature oven. His body still had injuries that hadn't healed up, because all these had happened in less than a second. Currently, Gustav had almost expended his energy and his body was currently smoking, but he still had Stark wrapped to the point that not a single skin could be seen. After he finished retracting Yarki, he felt a powerful presence appear right behind him. "Where is Stark?" A familiar voice called out to him. "That's Viltru." Gustav heaved a sigh of relief internally. He initially thought the master found a way to come back, but it looked like it was someone on their side. "Officer Crimson, where is Stark?" Viltru asked again with a disturbed tone. Gustav slowly turned around at this point as he began to unfold himself. Viltru's eyes widened in shock as he realized that Stark had been wrapped in Gustav's bosom all this time. Gustav deactivated size manipulation as he returned to normal length and passed Stark to Viltru. "What happened? Why is he in such a state?" Viltru asked after seeing that Stark was armless. "We played into their hands," Gustav voiced out as he slowly returned to human form. "Stark almost got carted away by this two-headed dragon who I presume is their leader," he added as he brought out a recovery pill from his storage device. "The beta-ranked mixed blood you mentioned?" Viltru asked. "Yes," Gustav answered as he fed Stark a recovery pill. Chapter 905. I sent him off with a gift. Viltra's face had a look of astonishment and confusion all mixed together. They were both Echo and Falcon-ranked mixed bloods, yet they had held back a Beta-ranked mixed blood without any outside help. He felt the leader of the cult might have gone easy on them since he was probably only trying to capture Stark, but still it was an impossible task for mixed bloods of their levels to manage to hold back a Beta rank. I suppose he's the one that escaped with spatial travel. Viltru seemed to have pieced things together as he voiced out. Yeah, Gustav didn't know how to explain that he had to kick him in or head, probably still be here since he got Stark back from him. I sent him off with a gift. He should have gotten it by now, Gustav said internally with a grin. The instant the master phased through the portal, his eyes widened in realization. What? He yelled out with a look of shock as he found out that what was in his grasp had been replaced with 4 spherical head-sized orbs. How did he? What are these? He stated with disbelief, written all over his face as he floated above an unknown part of the ocean. Dark purplish electric arcs could be seen swimming across the surface of these dark blue and reddish-colored orbs. He raised the orbs to observe them as he sensed something. Boom! A massive explosion rang out, spreading destructive waves of energy across over 1,000 miles. The ocean was affected as a gigantic hole that spread across a radius of more than 10,000 feet was generated with a wall of waves spreading in every direction. It was a good thing that this occurrence was taking place in the middle of the ocean. There was nothing to be found for miles except for small inhabited islands and seamounts, all of which were wiped out due to the destructive ripples. It was unknown if the person in the middle of the explosion had been affected, but it was obvious that the explosion had wreaked immense havoc. Time had arrived, and at this point, everyone was back in the residence. It had already spread all across the island that an intense battle broke out last night. However, the city folks and the members of the branches of the Vertigan family were left in the dark about the situation of the emblem. It was revealed that a battle between the Vertigan troops and members of a cult known as the Satori had gone down the previous night. The island folks were startled. It was hard for them to believe cults still existed in this day and age. Based on the disturbance, they realized the battle must have been a crazy one. At certain periods, the island trembled from the impact generated by intense attacks. The madam of the main family later released a press statement about how the cult members had been contained by the Vertigan troops. This calmed the mind of the island folks as footages were displayed which proved that a lot of the Satori members were captured. It wasn't revealed what the goal of the Satori members was, as this would show that the emblem was initially stolen. At the moment, the main family members were having a meeting in the main hall with Gustav being a part. Everyone had looks of reverence and appreciation on their faces at this point. No one doubted Gustav's ability anymore after witnessing as well as seeing the results of his actions. They had managed to capture around 420 members of the Satori alive. All of them were from one Vertigan branch or the other and had defected, but before Gustav's investigation, none of them had any idea. A lot of the Satori members were killed in the battle last night, especially those in the location where Gustav and Stark had the battle with their leader. Everyone was still in disbelief hearing about how Gustav had managed to stand against their leader, who was a beta-ranked mixed blood, and even saved Stark from getting captured by him. However, this had been confirmed by Viltru, the most powerful Vertigan, and Stark himself. Both of them sang praises of Gustav's prowess. This kid has a very bright future ahead of him. The Vertigan family should stay friends with such a person, Uncle Bila thought internally as stared at Gustav with a look of adoration. Thank you for your assistance, Officer Crimson. We will forever be in your debt, Madame Lillian stated with an appreciative tone. Gustav nodded in response, while some of the other uncles and aunts here also voiced their appreciation. His work here was pretty much done, but he was still worried about the leader of the cult, who was probably roaming about free at this point. Gustav didn't think the orbs were enough to kill the master despite how powerful it was. For all he knew, the master might not have been unfazed by the explosion. The problem now was Gustav had tried to track the master with life signs tracking, but he still had no idea where he cooped himself up in. He was out of range, so Gustav couldn't trace him with the link of the life sign. He could only see through the master's forehead, but even with that, He was unable to tell where the master was because he had hidden in an unknown coven. How are the interrogations going? Gustav voiced out from his seating position on the left side of the room. He needed to know if any of the Sator members would be able to identify the environment he saw through life signs tracking, so they could use that to track the leader. All of them claimed to be unfamiliar with the environment you described, Madame Salora responded while shaking her head. This made Gustav feel a little disturbed as he wondered how no one was able to identify where he was seeing with life signs tracking. Chapter 906. Visiting the cells. This meant the master already had contingency plans of hiding out in an unknown place if things ever went sideways. What exactly is that environment and how does it relate to the case? One of the uncles asked with a curious look. It's a lead, Gustav responded, but didn't reveal more than this. He would be unable to explain how he managed to find this lead, since he couldn't let anyone know he had a power like life signs tracking. Have both family branch heads been questioned? Gustav asked. Yes, they both have as well, but it's the same, Madame Lillian replied. Gustav had a contemplative look on his face as he heard that and held his chin. You don't have to worry, Officer Crimson. If the leader ever returns, we'll be ready, Madame Salora assured after seeing the contemplative look on Gustav's face. That's fine, but I want to ask them personally, Gustav demanded. Gustav left the interrogation to the main family after he had played his part in helping them capture the cult members. The main family had done a good job of interrogating the cult members and finding out their objectives. As expected, they planned to abduct Stark and get the emblem back by using him as a bargain, but not actually giving him back to the main family until they had cracked how to harness the power of the emblem. The leader was going to use the power to hijack power from the main family and let the cult run the island. The MBO would never interfere if such a situation happened because the cult members were also Vertigons. The MBO wouldn't want to interfere in inter-family conflict as they didn't really have any right to. It was a good thing the situation was resolved before it got to this point. The meeting they were holding was planned since they already knew Vertigan troops would come after them. However, they never expected that Stark would come over to the Master's Tower. The plan was to ambush the main family residence while the Vertigan troops were busy battling with the ones at the second tower outside the island. They had no idea that their other locations would be ambushed by Vertigan troops as well. Gustav and Stark's appearance was unexpected, but the Master felt it was the best situation, since he only needed to abduct Stark for everything to come to an end. However, he had not expected his plans to be foiled by the combined effort of Gustav and Stark. The family head ceremony would be held the next day, which was why Stark wasn't present in the meeting, because they were preparing him for tomorrow. Stark would be fusing with the emblem, which would spell the end of any plots, since the emblem could not be stolen the moment it fused with a Vertigan. Gustav wanted to wait till after the ceremony tomorrow before he decided to leave, but at the same time, he wanted to do all he could to locate the Master beforehand. Madame Salora and Uncle Bila led Gustav to the dungeon-like area where all the cultists were kept. The cells they were being kept in were energy-dissipating cells that prevented them from channeling their bloodline. The cell both branch heads were kept was significantly larger than the others since they were higher in strength. They were kept together in the same cell with glass walls. Gustav stood in front of the glass walls and stared at both prisoners who were seated with their backs against the wall with defeated looks on their faces. For a brief instant, Gustav recalled the final year cadet he defeated as he stared at Tritus's face. Well, looks like I might have made a lifelong enemy. This thought was thrown to the back of his mind the instant it was formulated. Gustav proceeded to describe the looks of the environment he saw during the activation of life sign tracking. Both of them listened with an unconcerned expression and later voiced out how they had no idea of where such a place was located. Even after giving out vivid details of what he saw, they still shook their heads in confusion. As you can see, Officer Crimson, just like we stated, they have no idea, Uncle Bila said from behind. There's still one last thing I have to try, Gustav said while looking around and staring at the other cells. Which is? Madame Salora asked from behind. Grant me access to go in, Gustav said while taking off his red jacket. What? Both of them voiced out with looks of confusion after hearing that. You heard me. I need to get in there. Gustav repeated himself. The cells repress bloodline channeling, so just like them, you will be unable to use your abilities, which makes it dangerous for you to go in there, Uncle Bila explained. I know. Grant me access, Gustav said with an unbothered expression. It's too dangerous, Madame Salora voiced out in disagreement as well. It is fine. I'm a well-trained MBO officer, so we'll be okay, Gustav assured them. They still had reluctant looks on their faces as they stared at each other for a while. All right then, but be very careful, okay? We don't know what they might try, Madame Salora finally gave in as she voiced out. Yes, you have to be careful, Uncle Bila added. No worries, I can handle it, Gustav responded. TSSSHHH. A small space opened up in the next moment, which was not big enough for even a little kid to fit through. Gustav pushed his hand forward, just as instructed, and took a step forward as well. Thrya, the instant he did that, he felt a kind of trippy pull and found himself on the other side of the glass. It was like a small spatial tunnelway with the ability to transport anything to the other side despite the size. Gustav could instantly feel his bloodline getting sealed after entering the cell. It's similar to Officer Bryant's ability, but on a much larger scale, Gustav thought as he recalled Instructor Bryant from the MBO camp. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.